Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Cabbage Head Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Had Deadly Spirit Power? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Part 1, Ghost Lights. Naomasa is filled with worry as he watches the alley fight on the monitor in front of him. That knife came close. Too close. Or at least he thought it did, considering that the young vigilante appears as nothing more than a staticky blur in the camera footage, distorting and warping the video almost beyond view. And that's without the eerie red cloud of smoke that curls and tumbles around the entire scene. And yes, he does mean young vigilante. A child. The very few eyewitness accounts of Ghost were very clear about that. The kid doesn't even bother to use a voice changer, though if the way the cameras behave around him is any indication of how he affects electronics, Naomasa can wager a few guesses as to why. However, it was the other reports about the boy that were even more concerning. Naomasa looks up as the door opens to the only person who never knocks. Eraserhead makes a beeline for the coffee machine in the corner before even looking at Naomasa, filling his thermos with the steaming liquid he had pre-made knowing the underground hero would be coming. He then plops down on the cushioned chair across from him, digging his eye drops out of his pocket. Rough night. Eraser just shoots him an annoyed look. You wouldn't believe. Well, I have another case for you. Eraser groans as Naomasa pulls out the file he'd prepared earlier and places it on the desk. And I think you'll be interested in this one. He turns the monitor to Eraser, waiting patiently as the hero watches the footage impassively. A new vigilante? Eraser asks, narrowing his eyes ever so slightly, what's with the static? Naomasa pauses the video right as one of the thugs swung his knife. Even with all the static, it looks as if the blade goes straight through the kid instead of hitting him. This is Ghost, a vigilante active in the outer city of Mizudafu. He's also known to sell information and analysis to underground heroes and fellow vigilantes, and from what I've seen, it's professional grade. I may have heard of him, Eraser grunts, so I'm assuming you want me to bring him in? Not in the way you think. Naomasa opens the file from before. There have been some strange reports from both eyewitnesses and criminals brought in after encountering Ghost. Eraser nods slightly, encouraging him to go on. First of all, every single one of them insists that he's young. Likely around 12 or 13, at least according to his height and description. Eraser's eyes widen a little in shock, before he closes them, bringing his hand up to pinch the bridge of his nose. And I'm guessing there's more? Nodding gravely, Naomasa levels Eraser with a serious look. One of the criminals we brought in last week had a damaged quirk. The hero almost looks confused for a second, before his whole body jolts in wide-eyed recognition. The chair scrapes the ground as Eraser abruptly stands, slamming his hands down on the desk. You're serious? You really think it's him? Eraser demands, his usual flat and even tone interrupted by an amount of hope and emotion that Naomasa hasn't heard from the man in a long while. If you're asking if I think Ghost is the kid you've been looking for almost 2 years, Naomasa opens the file and slides it towards the hero. A green-haired boy with wide, matching green eyes and freckles stares up from the page, a nervous smile plastered across his face. Then yes, that is what I'm saying. Eraser's gaze almost seems distant. Naomasa swears he hears him whisper, "You're alive? Thank God you're alive." Naomasa knew that the underground hero had gotten attached to the kid. Eraser had spent nearly a week watching over him in the hospital, before the kid apparently disappeared without a trace. He doesn't know what happened, but he knew Eraser had been looking ever since, but the way he's reacting makes Naomasa feel as if he'd just told the man he'd found his child. I'm not arresting him, Eraser states, his hard glare leaving no room for argument. He slides a hand down his face. I won't. No, I can't do that to the kid. And I'm not asking you to, Naomasa gives a reassuring smile. As far as the rest of the department knows, Ghost and Midoriya Izuku are still two completely separate people. What? Eraser, I'm not asking you to catch Ghost, Naomasa states calmly. I'm asking for help with a missing persons case. Well, at least officially, Eraser gives him a prodding look. What about the commission? Eraser questions. They were looking for him too. Naomasa sighs. Eraser's not wrong that the commission will be a problem. They are the reason the police are offering such a high reward for any information on the kid's whereabouts, after all. However, I have someone on that. I let Nedzu read some of the kid's analysis from when he was in the hospital, and needless to say, he's on board. A heavy silence fills the room as Eraser glares at him, searching for any sign of deceit. Sighing, Eraser slides back down into his chair and resolves himself with a nod. Not sure whether to feel relieved or horrified that the rat's involved, but I'll ask Aiko if she can cover my patrol routes for a while. Naomasa heaves a sigh of relief. If anyone can find Midoriya and bring him to safety, it's Eraserhead. He just hopes the kid can stay out of trouble until then. Izuku's going to die. It's all he can think as thick, warm slime floods his throat. All Izuku had wanted when he'd left his apartment that afternoon was a quiet grocery run. That's all. The mini fridge in his small one-room flat was totally empty, save for a half-eaten plate of dumpster katsudon he'd had to fight an alley cat over. He's saving that. So he'd had to go out. You'd better believe he wouldn't be out during the day otherwise. But as soon as he entered the overpass marking his usual route to the shopping district, muttering to himself about something or the other, he was attacked by a villain. Because, why not, right? It burns. His lungs scream as he struggles for air he has no access to, tears forming in his eyes as he thrashes and claws at the liquid cage he's trapped in. He tries to reach for the rounded objects in his pocket, a trio of assorted enchanted bombs he keeps on his person at all times for emergencies. He distantly hopes he remembered to label them this time. Why do these things always happen to him? He already knows the universe hates him, but this is ridiculous. Quit struggling, kid. I'm not going to kill you. I just need— The villain pauses abruptly as Izuku almost snags one of the eyes floating in the gray mass. The slime tightens even more around Izuku, the pressure becoming nearly unbearable, arms pinned to his sides. Your body. That's supposed to be comforting? Izuku shudders at the thought of this villain wearing his skin like a meat suit. But then he shudders even more as he feels his power, his aura well up inside of him, agitated and threatened. Its usual white-green color becomes an angry red-black, shifting from its usual protective position around his body as it reaches for the villain's aura, singing its terrible, deadly song. No, 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 please don't, not again, na-na-na-na. A harsh rush of wind rips through the overpass, pulling the slime off of Izuku. Izuku crashes to the ground, coughing and hacking his guts up on his hands and knees. It must be minutes before he finally feels like he can breathe again. Then he stiffens as what feels like the biggest hand he's ever seen slaps him on the back. Are you all right, young man? Izuku startles. That voice sounds familiar. There's just no way, right? When he looks up to find the number one hero crouched over him, his signature smile blinding, he has to hold back a strangled squeal. The huge, muscle-bound symbol of peace smiles down at him, patting his back reassuringly. The only thing missing is his hero costume. The man is dressed in a casual white t-shirt and green cargo pants, but otherwise, he looks exactly like the videos. The two tufts of blonde hair standing straight up. The huge, reassuring smile he's never stopped smiling no matter what. The thing that sticks out the most, however, is his blinding, golden fireball of an aura, almost too bright to look at. Holy shit, it's All Might. That's correct. You're safe now, young man, I am here, the hero announces. Izuku blushes, realizing he just said that out loud. Ah, I'm fine. Izuku replies, giving a shaky smile and a thumbs up, careful to avoid looking the man in the eyes. He can't deal with that right now. The hero's huge hand pats him on the back again, almost knocking him into the ground. That was a close call, young man. You really should watch your surroundings better. You never know what could be lurking in the shadows. You have no idea. All Might stands up fully, scooping up what looks like a water bottle, absolutely towering over Izuku's small frame, and turns to leave. Well, if you're okay, I really must be going. I have to take this guy to the police. Wait. Izuku practically jumps up, scrambling forward and reaching for the notebook and pen he always carries in case he runs into a villain fight. He quickly finds it soaked through with slimy water. Still, he can't let this opportunity go to waste. He still can't really believe this is even happening right now. Can I ask you something? Izuku doesn't know what he even wants to ask. If he can be a hero? Really? Images of a blonde boy with spiky hair and violently red eyes fill his mind, sneering at him, calling him useless, telling him he should take a swan dive off the... Izuku shakes that memory from his mind, his elf-like ears drooping a little at the mere thought of it. His dream of being a hero, a dream carefully nurtured by two childhood friends, is long dead, shattered to pieces even before his life went to shit. He knows that something like him could never be a hero. But hope is a hard beast to kill. The hero turns back hesitantly, wide smile strained a little. Of course you can, my boy. But make it quick, I am on a very tight schedule at the moment. Izuku hesitates for a moment, before drawing in a shaky breath. Did you think that I found you? A shudder racks Izuku's body, and he finally sees the spirit sitting just behind All Might. Even sitting it easily reaches his height. Bright green eyes stare right through him, its golden fur waving through the air as it fixes its fox-like features in a sort of triumphant grin. Two horns, he notes. Definitely not a spirit he wants to mess with. What does that mean? Found me? Do I think you can do what, young man? Izuku snaps his gaze back to All Might, and realizes he made the mistake of making eye contact a little too late. Izuku is hit with the strongest sense of pain he's ever felt as All Might tenses, and then suddenly the air is filled with a puff of smoke. Izuku coughs and waves his hand in front of his face. Does All Might use smoke bombs too? Something in the haze catches Izuku's attention. A single long strand of blonde hair drifts through the air, tumbling over itself as it makes its way right into Izuku's gaping mouth. Now he's choking for an entirely different reason. It's, well, stringy and coarse, and why am I thinking about this? He tries to cough it up, but he's pretty sure it went all the way down his throat. But when the smoke clears, what Izuku can only describe as Small Might is standing there. He's still just as tall as he was before, but if it weren't for the long locks of blonde in the front, as deflated as they are now, and the blue pinpricks of power in his eyes, Izuku wouldn't have recognized this skeletal figure as All Might. Well, that, and the fact that he still has the same flaming gold aura as before. All Might. The skeletal man just gapes at him, small trails of blood leaking from his mouth, before he suddenly surges forward, grabbing Izuku by the shoulders. What are you doing? Izuku can't help the way his body locks up, trembling uncontrollably. Did you just swallow something? What was it? A piece of hair maybe? Izuku shakily replies. Is something wrong? His breath catches. Of course something's wrong. The man looks terrified. It must be his eyes, they scared him. They scare everyone. Of course they do, he's nothing but a monster, everyone can tell. What if All Might hurts him? All Might's a hero. Why would he? Wouldn't I deserve it? All Izuku can hear is his own heart pounding in his chest, trying to break free, to escape the panic clawing its way up his throat, stealing his breath away. He's suddenly choking, gasping for air. All Might says something else, but he can't hear what, and he feels the hands let go of his shoulders, or maybe he falls through them, he can't tell. He crashes to the ground, his legs suddenly unable to bear his weight, and starts curling in on himself, trying to be as small as possible. A concerned hand reaches out for him, but he can't help but flinch away, can't help the memories flooding his mind, of different hands reaching for him, taking him away, of his mother's cold, lifeless body lying a few feet behind him. It's not me fault, I'm sorry, it's not. He desperately pushes the memory from his mind, forcing himself to breathe before the panic fully sets in. In for 4-2-3-4, out for 4-2-3-4. After what feels like forever, he lets out a shaky breath, his heartbeat beginning to settle slowly as he catches his breath, stealing his mind. He's only vaguely aware of All Might's concerned voice issuing from somewhere above him. He can't do this right now. He needs to get away. He doesn't remember getting to his feet, running away, hearing a frantic voice calling after him. But he does know that he only makes it a few blocks away before he's being pulled roughly into an alleyway. He tumbles to the ground, barely able to catch himself before he faceplants. What is it now? How could this day get any worse? He looks up at his assailant, preparing for a fight, and is shocked by what he finds. At first he thinks it's the slime villain again. But how could that possibly be true? Then he sees the distinctly transparent quality this slimy figure has, and he almost takes off running again. That must be the slime villain spirit. And it said, "Don't think I didn't see what you were about to do, you abomination." Izuku shivers for a moment, but then he really gets a good look at the spirit. Its towering, slimy form swirls with iridescent colors like an oil slick, and floating around inside, along with its eyes and serrated teeth, are about 9 or 10 horns. It may be big, but its energy is weak. It won't be able to get through the protective layer his aura makes around his body. What did you want me to do? He was trying to kill me. Izuku bites back, mustering up his courage. Spirits are much easier to deal with than humans, after all. So what? The spirit snarls. It brings its glaring eyes down further in its mass and puffs up, in what Izuku guesses is an attempt to appear more intimidating. It doesn't work. Why is it always the weaker ones that try to be scary? I've heard about what you do to people. You were gonna destroy his aura. Izuku does still a bit at that. I didn't mean to. It just... Mommy, what's that guy doing? Izuku turns around to see a woman and a little girl holding hands near the mouth of the alleyway, angled to the right as if they were just walking past. The woman's mouth is hanging open, confused and slightly fearful. Izuku just nervously waves. Maybe if I act casual they won't think I'm crazy? The woman gapes at him a bit longer, before she drags her daughter away hurriedly. Izuku swears he hears her hiss a hurried, "Don't look," to her whining child. Well, that went well. You'd think in a world full of people with superpowers, people would be more open-minded. He doesn't have time to think about it though, because the spirit behind him seems to have finally had enough of him. A huge glob of slime slams into his side as he turns back to it, but it harmlessly rebounds off the protective shell of his aura, not doing any real damage besides knocking him over. Izuku crashes into the dumpster behind him, landing on a pile of filled garbage bags with a groan. The slime spirit looks fearful for a moment, then huffs and leaves, disappearing through the wall of the alley. Izuku lies there for a moment, allowing himself to process what the F just happened. Who was that strange spirit? It must have been with All Might. Spirits don't tend to stay near humans they aren't bonded with. But then why did it say it found him? Does it need help? That would be just about the only reason a spirit would seek him out. Only if they absolutely had to. What the hell was up with All Might? Was that small form his true form? If that's the case, then does that mean he has some kind of transformation quirk? There are many theories on All Might's quirk. He's seen that one a few times, but it had always seemed to be the most unlikely one. If it was just a simple transformation quirk, then why would All Might be so secretive about it? Maybe he should look into it more? And if it was really his quirk, then why was he in so much pain? He heaves a sigh and collects himself before he gets lost in another mutter storm, rising from the ground with a groan before forcing his tired body to the mouth of the alley and towards the shopping district that the woman and her daughter just went towards. He really just wants to get this over with so he can go home and sleep for a year. Auras are complicated. Once ignited by a spirit bond at birth, they explode into an endless array of colors and shapes, from swirling galaxies to deep, dark oceans. Everyone has one, and everyone's is different. They are essentially the core of who a person is, and if you can learn to read them, they can tell you almost anything you need to know about a person. Take the boy standing next to him in the medicine aisle, for example. His aura spirals, swirling in dark purple hues similar to the boy's wild, lavender hair. It seems very volatile and yet serenely calm at the same time, but deep within it he can see a fire burning with a fierce rage and determination. Izuku wonders what kind of quirk it gives him. Its darker depths remind him of some mental quirks he's seen. Maybe some kind of telepathy? Or even something like mind con. Can I help you? Izuku jumps. Tired lavender eyes glare into his own, making his skin crawl. That's odd. Usually people can't stand looking him in the eyes too long. Ah no. Sorry. Izuku sheepishly stutters, holding his hands up placatingly. The muttering and staring probably looked so creepy. He notices his hands get glowy and transparent for a moment before becoming solid again. He's getting too anxious again, he shouldn't be doing that in public. It's fine, the boy drawls. You were just muttering. When Izuku doesn't say anything in reply, the boy turns to grab a bottle of midnight-themed melatonin gummies off the shelf and makes to leave before he seemingly changes his mind, turning back to Izuku. He takes a moment to look Izuku up and down, eyes scanning the raggedy, 2 sizes too big hoodie and sweats he probably either got at the thrift store or fished out of a dumpster somewhere. He can't remember right now, his still kind of slimy, unkempt white hair, and then at his basket full of various first aid supplies and discounted canned foods. Izuku knows how suspicious he looks, but people usually mind their own business, including heroes, unfortunately. He doesn't mind. It's what's best for everyone, honestly. The other boy seems to wrestle with himself mentally for a second before asking, "Have I seen you around before? We're the same age, right?" The boy then narrows his eyes in thought. "You look familiar." Izuku is startled at the question. Why is this happening now? Most people either just ignore him or steer clear once they see his eyes. He's well aware of how homeless he looks, and it doesn't help that he looks a bit younger than he actually is, but people don't usually care enough to be concerned, and if they do it's only for a passing moment. One look at his eyes and they all walk away, saying a hero will help him. All he'd wanted when he went out this afternoon was a peaceful grocery run with no spirits or people bothering him. So far he's gotten neither of his wishes. Is that really too much to ask? Of course it is, you're you, Izuku grumbles to himself before he can think better of it. What? Izuku's eyes snap up. Nothing. I adjust. A bright purple flash next to purple hair has Izuku trailing off. A spirit bursts into being right next to the lavender boy, a dark purple, wisp-like thing with 4 ridges on its back acting as its horns. The spirit's head is like a ball of fire, its little humanoid body a fourth of its size. The most striking thing about it, though, are its large eyes. They're mesmerizing, spiraling in hypnotic neon blues, magentas, and highlighter yellows. He must be staring too long, because it quirks one eye at him in question before huffing in annoyance. A hand waves through the spirit, and Izuku turns his attention back to the lavender boy, who is also looking at him in question, slightly annoyed, probably wondering what the hell he's staring at. Well, this is awkward. Now the guy probably thinks he's a creep and insane. Izuku quickly mumbles an excuse for himself and fast walks nervously out of the aisle, getting checked out as quickly as possible before practically fleeing the store. By the old ones, he really should learn at least one social skill if he's going to keep running into people like this. It's not even 15 minutes later that Izuku encounters the lavender boy again. The boy is currently being held to the wall by his collar, surrounded by 3 other frankly familiar boys in middle school uniforms, all giggling or sneering wickedly. The lavender boy, however, seems just as uncaring and dead inside as he did in the store. Izuku feels his hands ball into fists, a dull ache welling in his chest. Bitter memories of his days at Aldera fill his mind. Izuku hates bullies. He's standing at the mouth of the alleyway before he can even think about how dumb of an idea this is. He silently steps behind the 3 boys, footsteps barely making a sound as he creeps up behind the one holding the lavender boy's collar. Lavender boy's eyes widen a little in surprise when they meet Izuku's, but none of the others even notice his presence. Izuku has noticed that he's developed a few odd guilty pleasures over the past 2 years, one of which is scaring the shit out of people. He thinks it's only fair. They scare the shit out of him too. Boo! He has to stifle a giggle as all 3 of them nearly jump out of their skin, and Izuku feels a little better when he sees Lavender Boy hiding a smirk too. Where the hell did you come from? The first one, a kid with extendable fingers, exclaims. Izuku uses the moment of distraction to shift and place himself in between Lavender Boy and the other 3 boys, body instinctively settling into a defensive stance. The 3 flinch a little at his gaze meeting theirs, but they quickly shake it off, averting their eyes. Extendable fingers? Izuku takes a moment to look at the 3 boys, really look at them. He doesn't recognize the one to the left, a stocky, plain-looking boy with blue hair, but the long-fingered one in the middle and the one with red webbed wings to the right, he recognizes as Kaken's goons from Aldra. Sheet, maybe they won't recognize me? That thought goes out the window, however, when he notices the winged boy Tsubasa has his mouth hanging open in shock, eyes blown wide in recognition. Minute. Who the F are you? Finger boy growls. Izuku doesn't remember his name, probably never got the chance to learn it in the first place. Kaken never called any of them by their names, and it's not like they really talked to him. He only remembers Tsubasa's because his name literally means wings. Mind your own dimmin' business, a-hole. Tsubasa reaches for the other boy's arm, eyes still locked on Izuku, but he's quickly brushed off. Izuku has to break this up before Tsubasa has the chance to say anything. He says in a deep breath and gathers his courage. Hey, actually, it looks like you're the one who should mind your own business, Izuku states, jabbing a thumb behind him to the lavender boy. He clearly doesn't want you in his. Finger boy just scowls. I don't give two Fs what that villain scum wants. Out of the way. The boy raises his fist angrily, reeling back for a punch. He feels Lavender Boy's aura pulse in agitation, as if preparing to activate his quirk. Izuku tenses, preparing to defend himself, but Tsubasa suddenly lurches forward and grabs Finger Boy's arm. What? The boy snaps, whipping his head towards Tsubasa in agitation. That's Deku. A heavy silence fills the alley as all of them, including Lavender Boy, stare at Izuku in shock. Finger Boy squints his eyes, looking at Izuku intensely, before they widen in recognition. Holy shit, you're right. The blue-haired one just looks confused. Who's Deku? Are you serious? That quirkless kid that went missing a few years back? The one that broke Bakugo's quirk? Doesn't ring a bell? Oh, the boy says, backing up a little in fear. Finger Boy seems to be lost in thought, before his face twists up into a sinister grin. Izuku tenses up, gaze hardening. He doesn't like where this is going. You know, they're offering a sheet ton of money for any information on you, Finger Boy sneers, reaching forward to grab Izuku's arm. How about we all go down to the police station? We really need the money, you'll help us out, won't you? Izuku doesn't think he could be any more tense, his aura churning angrily inside him as he glares at the other boy. All signs of his stutter are lost as he shoots a venomous scowl at the boy. Why do you need me? You saw me. You already have your information. Finger Boy just scoffs, tightening his grip on Izuku's arm. Yeah, but imagine how much they'll pay if we brought you in? Before Izuku can even react, a branch of his aura separates from the larger white-green mass, forming a fist before hurling itself into the wall just to the right of Finger Boy's head. The boy shakily glances at the crater in the cement wall next to him, before letting go of Izuku's arm and staring at him in horror. One of the more unique properties of Izuku's aura is its ability to take on many different shapes and forms according to his intentions, as well as its limited ability to interact with the physical world. Although he doesn't technically have a quirk, lacking a spirit bond of his own, his ability to minutely control his own aura allows him to mimic the effects of quirks like telekinesis and strength enhancement, among other things. That is, when it's actually listening to him. Just be glad it didn't go for your quirk, Izuku huffs, a little shaken by what just happened. Finger Boy gives a frantic nod, and he and the other boys take off out of the alleyway, leaving Izuku behind to catch his breath and try to get his aura under control again. It's been very volatile today, he's noticed. Are you really Deku? Izuku nearly jumps out of his skin as he turns around wearily to see the Lavender Boy, his wisp-like spirit floating not far behind him, watching him curiously with its hypnotic eyes. He'd nearly forgotten he was even there, which is kind of dumb, considering he was the whole reason he even ended up in this mess. Yeah, I guess I am. Izuku replies sheepishly, fidgeting with his fingers. And you are? The other boy gives him an uncertain look before he drawls. Shinso Hitoshi. Emiteria Izuzu. Izuku stammers, not sure what to do with himself. An awkward silence settles over the alley, until Izuku notices the bruise growing over Shinsu's cheek. It causes an itch in the back of his mind, one that he rushes to scratch. Oh no! Did they hurt you? Let me see. Shinso tenses as Izuku drops his grocery bags and pulls the much taller boy's face down to his level. That's going to be a pretty bad bruise if he doesn't do something. What are you? Shinso protests, but he's cut off by Izuku placing his palm against the side of his cheek. Izuku's aura instinctively rushes and gathers in his hand at his call, and a white light intermingled with soft greens filters through the indent in his palm, a formerly vestigial trait he inherited from his father. The bruise on Shinso's face slowly begins to melt away. Izuku has always found it funny how this destructive power of his is just as capable of healing. It never makes him feel any better though. No matter how many people he heals with this power, it will never erase the hurt it's caused. Once he's done and the bruise has fully gone away, Izuku takes his hand away, the light dimming until it disappears entirely, and a bone-deep exhaustion settles within him. Shinso's spirit gives him a curious look, before nodding its approval. Huh, Shinso huffs in surprise, bringing a hand to his now uninjured cheek. He glances at the crater in the wall to his right in confusion, before settling his suspicious gaze back in Izuku. I thought you had a telepathic quirk? Well, actually, T-hat would be telekinesis. It's the power to move objects with your mind and comes with a very wide range of uses. It's actually a very common kind of quirk. My mom actually had a minor FO. Izuku's voice quickly devolves into a string of mumbles too quiet to hear, lost in his own train of thought. Unbeknownst to Izuku, Shinso slips out his phone and sends a quick text, before hiding it again in his pocket, sighing, way to avoid the question, dude. Izuku goes stiff with embarrassment. Sorry, what were we talking about again? Your quirk. Oh. An awkward silence settles over the alleyway. Shinso just calmly leans back against the alley wall, tired eyes never leaving Izuku. The silence is becoming oppressive, so Izuku musters up the courage to ask the strange boy the one thing that's been bothering him since they met. Why you're not scared? Of what you? Shinso scoffs. No offense, but you look like a light breeze could put you on your butt. No, I mean, my eyes don't scare you. You can't tell that I'm not human is left unsaid. You go to Aldra, right? Didn't you hear what I did to Kaken? You mean Bakugo? Shinso sneers. That perfect quirked a-hole had it coming to him. No, he didn't. Izuku bites back the retort and remains silent. He doesn't understand. No one deserves to have that done to them. He's seen the results one too many times to ever think otherwise. Memories filter through his mind of a dim room lined with cages, barely breathing bodies strewn around him. He shudders and pushes it away. Shinso is looking at him with barely masked concern, and hesitates before saying slowly, as if trying not to frighten a skittish animal, you know, my mom's a hero, she can help you. I know someone who's really worried about you. Oh, I'm fine. I don't need help, Izuku says, pulling a bit harder on his fingers in his nervousness, a bit confused by what the boy meant. Who could possibly be worried about me? Thank you though. You've been missing for 2 years, Shinso deadpants. I highly doubt that classifies as fine. He makes air quotes around the word. WL. A loud crash resounds through the air, along with a distant cacophony of shouts and screams. Izuku looks around, thinking that it could be a new spirit popping in and making a commotion, but there's no one in the alley besides him, Shinso and the wisp spirit. His eyes land on the mouth of the alley. There is a strange absence of people on the normally busy street of the shopping district. Taking a peek out of the alley, Izuku can see why. A crowd is gathering about 2 blocks down the road. He can't quite make out why at this distance, but he can see flames running up the side of a building on one side, and something big, gray and amorphous wriggling around just beyond the crowd. What's going on? Shinso asks, stepping out of the alleyway too. Not sure. A villain attack, maybe? Izuku squints. He is just about to walk towards it when he notices the small brownish blur hurtling towards him. Help me help him helpful. The spirit crashes into Izuku, knocking him a good 10 feet back, sending him flying back into a lamppost. Images forcefully enter his mind when they make contact, ripped out of his mind as the lilting, song-like language of the ancient spirits fills his head. The spirit's name. He sees explosions ringing out over desolate battlefields, knives lunging out in darkness, the concrete jungle of Mizutofu craving and crumbling on top of him as he feels the most indescribable sense of peril he's ever felt in his life. Kaiken. A spirit of danger. The language of the Old Ones doesn't translate into any known language. Of course, a language that doesn't use words could never be translated into them, so instead he tries to find words that describe the feeling he got from the name. Though, Kaiken is little more than just a word used to describe something dangerous. Maybe Kiko would work? The small, weasel-like spirit in question lifts her teary eyes shamefully to meet his, the deep red he finds in them achingly familiar. Kiko looks a bit like a white weasel, though with a gold-ringed pattern in her fur that reminds him of a lemur's tail. Lining her back are deep red quills like a porcupine, the ends of some of them igniting in showers of sparks like a lit fuse. She has a long tail pointed with more of those fiery quills. 4 flat horns adorn either side of her head where her ears should be, the first set jutting outward and the second coming out directly on top of the first and curving up slightly. They're a deep, mahogany red, with golden flecks at the tips. Her gold-rimmed red eyes stare up at Izuku pleadingly. Her words echo in his head, "Please help. They said you would." Izuku looks over to Shinso from the ground, who has just run over to him, looking around frantically for whatever had just launched Izuku so hard. Someone seems to be blowing up his phone, because it's buzzing non-stop in his pocket. "Are you okay? What the F was that?" Shinso huffs, his usually bored expression lifted for the first time Izuku has seen. "I'm fine, just a little sore," Izuku reassures, rubbing his back. He'd hit the lamppost directly, but luckily he'd managed to avoid hitting his head in the impact. He soon has to return his attention to the small spirit still vibrating in his lap, however. Kiko has started tugging at his shirt, pulling him towards the crowd hard enough to almost rip his hoodie, and starts to plead and beg again almost too fast for him to understand. Shinso's eyes go wide as he stares at his chest, seeing Izuku's hoodie being yanked roughly by something that isn't there. "What? Please, sepple. Settle down," Izuku shouts, overwhelmed by the situation. He picks the spirit up by the midsection just below her tiny, sharp-clawed arms, pointedly ignoring the odd look he's getting from Shinso. Surprisingly, Kiko's quills tamp themselves down, as if to avoid poking him. Izuku decides that he'll just have to ignore Shinso for now. He can explain later. Or he could just run away and hope they don't run into each other again. He'll probably do that. Izuku sighs, refocusing his attention on the spirit in his grasp. "Why do you need help?" She looks back at the commotion happening down the street, eyes filling with tears. "That slimy human is attacking my bond. You used to be friends, right? I know he hurt you, but please, he can't breathe and the heroes aren't helping." Izuku settles her with a confused look. Someone he used to be friends with? Someone who hurt him? But who used to be his? Izuku says in a sharp breath, realization hitting him like a freight train. Kaken. She has to be talking about Kaken. He looks at Kiko again, her blood-red eyes suddenly much more familiar than before. Because they're Kaken's eyes. Before he can even think about it, he's running, ignoring Shinso's shouts from behind him. Kiko settles around his shoulders as he quickly approaches the crowd. He tries to ignore his rising panic at the thought of being stuck between so many people as his form shimmers and glows slightly and he plunges through the crowd. People shout and shiver as he passes through them like a ghost, but he doesn't stop until he reaches the blockade at the front of the crowd. The firefighter hero Backdraft is there, using his hose to fight a fire that had sprung up in a building to the right of the scene, and Kamui Woods is working to keep the crowd under control, his quirk forming a makeshift blockade of tree branches to keep people from getting too close to the villain or the fire. The Lady and Death Arms, however, are just standing there, watching. Izuku runs over to them, but branches grow to obscure his path. "Stay back, it's dangerous," Kamui Wood says, leveling him with a stern, albeit slightly fearful look. "I know it seems exciting, but you could get hurt." "Exciting? Someone's dying. And you're not doing anything." Izuku shouts frustratedly. "Why are they just standing there? What's going on here?" Death Arms says, having heard Izuku's shouts. He startles when he meets Izuku's eyes, backing up slightly. Behind him, The gray-green mass of the sludge villain rides, his massive liquid body encased around a familiar spiky blonde figure in a middle school Gakurin. Kaken. Izuku tenses, face scrunching up in desperation and hands balling into fists. He's running out of time. Just some kid making a scene, Kamui Woods huffs to Death Arms. Death Arms shakes off his initial reaction and narrows his eyes at Izuku, crossing his arms shakily in annoyance. At present, there are no heroes on scene with quirks suitable for the current situation. We will wait for backup and then handle the villain accordingly. But what about Kaken? He already can't breathe. He'll be dead by then. This sparks a few shocked whispers from the crowd. Someone shouts at the heroes, and others quickly join in, throwing accusations and worried remarks. A few reporters he hadn't noticed before fight to get closer to the shouting. Kamui Woods is quick to respond, "No need to be alarmed, people. The situation is completely under control." The branches of his arms start to push Izuku further into the crowd, even as he struggles forward and pleads with the heroes to just do something. Then Izuku's bright green eyes meet with red ones on the other side of the branches, and the entire rest of the world seems to fade away. He's moving before he can even think, Kamui Woods' eyes widening as he phases right through his arms and ignores the other heroes shouting for him to stop. Izuku's hands slip into his hoodie pocket, pulling out a tiny wooden stick wrapped in red bandages covered in deeper red sigils. He pours his aura into it, and it expands into a full-length bow staff, the sigils glowing faintly with a white-green light. "Hey, it's you Aga Ag." The villain cuts off with a scream as Izuku maneuvers to slam his staff into his eye, stunning him long enough to reach into the slime and drag Katsuki out just enough for him to get his head above the slime. Katsuki's eyes widen in immediate recognition. Dash. Focus. Izuku snaps, bapping him on the head like a cat before grabbing his collar to try and pull him out the rest of the way. Something heavy slams into Izuku's side and sends him sprawling into the burning building next to them, glass scraping his arms and sides as he sails through a window. He tucks into a roll and lands gracefully in a crouched position, eyes scanning the flames and debris for whatever just attacked him. His aura snaps out to catch something gray flying at him, and he realizes it's the slime spirit from before. "I thought I told you to stay away from him." The spirit wriggles in his aura's grasp, snarling and snapping at him with its detached set of sharp teeth. Izuku's about to reply, when Kiko suddenly rears her head in a growl of her own. "Get out of the way." The quills on her back ignite, sparking wildly before she flicks her tail towards the other spirit. Izuku doesn't know where the explosion comes from, but the slime spirit is flung back through the wall. It peeks back into the room wearily before disappearing, likely retreating back to the spirit world. Kiko's mouth twists into a triumphant grin. "That works, I guess? Katsuki is dead. He must be dead. It's the only explanation. There's just no FANG way that was really Deku. It can't be." Slime starts to fill Katsuki's vision again. He clamps a hand over his mouth and nose, clawing frantically at the slime with the other. Small sparks come out of his hand that can no longer produce explosions. He feels so helpless it makes him want to scream. Not that he doesn't deserve it. Maybe if he wasn't such a villainous a-hole he could have already blasted this fucker to hell. He doesn't know where Not Deku went. One minute he was pulling him out of the sludge and the next he was being flung into a burning building by, well, nothing. Katsuki's thoughts are interrupted by the villain's sudden screech of pain. The slime retreats from around him, pulling itself closer to the villain's eyes and mouth until it forms a vaguely human shape, clutching his head. Katsuki scrambles away as quickly as he can, but a length of dark green goo snags his leg before he can make it very far. "Just quit fighting already. It'll only take a second." "F you." Katsuki stomps and kicks at the slime, but it's no use, the sludge already crawling further up his leg. A hissing noise fills the air, and Katsuki turns to see Not Deku chuck a FING downright cartoonish-looking bomb wrapped in pale blue bandages at the villain's feet. The ground explodes into a blooming cascade of ice, encasing the villain's legs and the tentacle of slime still wrapped around Katsuki's ankle. Spikes of ice bloom up from where the bomb hit the ground, one stopping just short of his face. Katsuki pulls his leg free, the slime shattering like glass as he does so. Are you okay? Katsuki stills immediately. He knows that voice. Katsuki's head snaps around, and his eyes widen as he really sees him for the first time. He's changed so much. His wild forest green curls have turned completely white, and his ears have become long and droopy and pointed like some kind of elf. His skin is pale and ghostly, the constellation of freckles covering his nose and cheeks standing out against it. The most jarring, however, is how small and frail he looks. The bags under his eyes are bordering on bruises, and his baggy, threadbare clothes seem to engulf his tiny frame. But those brilliant, emerald green eyes, they're the same. Even as he seems to be trying to look anywhere but at Katsuki, he can tell. It's really him. Katsuki can't believe it, but it's really him. Deku's alive. The minute he's really alive. As Katsuki looks up into that freckled, wide-eyed face he hasn't seen in what feels like forever, he can't help the tears of relief that start to well in his eyes. He quickly wipes them away. God, he's pathetic. A pale hand reaches out, shaky and hesitant, and Katsuki quickly takes it. He's reluctant to let go after he's up on 2 feet, like Deku will vanish the moment they're not touching. Deku? Is that really you? Deku stiffens up, his elf-like ears drooping as he pulls at his fingers like he used to when they were kids. Still just as anxious as ever. I dash. You eh. The sludge villain rears up, his body exploding again in a rush of dark green fluid as he breaks through the ice and barrels towards them at breakneck speed. Katsuki immediately tries to pull Deku behind him, but he doesn't budge, instead shooting him a look that says, "I've got this," and a soft smile before turning back to the villain. There is something strange in Deku's eyes, something Katsuki can't comprehend just yet. Forever. Deku steps forward, dropping the bow staff he was holding before, and stares into the villain's eyes dead-on. And miraculously, the villain stops dead in his tracks. What follows has got to be the weirdest staring contest Katsuki has ever seen. A giant, angry ball of slime versus a tiny, homeless-looking teenager. And the weirdest part? Deku seems to be winning. The two just stare at each other, and it seems like the whole world goes still as the two wage their silent battle, until Deku takes another step forward. The villain flinches back, yet seems unable to take his eyes off of Deku. What are you? He whimpers feebly, still inching backwards. Deku laughs, and it makes Katsuki's heart sink at how pitiful and broken it sounds. I ask myself that every day. Then Deku wobbles, and Katsuki's stomach drops as he watches blood drip from Deku's face onto the cement. Katsuki makes to move towards him, to catch him, to just do anything to help his broken wreck of a childhood friend, but the villain takes the opportunity first. Deku! Something happens as the villain's massive fist comes down on Deku. Katsuki's not sure how to describe it, but the air just gets heavy. He can see a flash of light, angry and red in its intensity, and then it's all over. A scream rips through the air, startling everyone out of the dazed stupor they had been in, and the slime villain's suddenly very flesh body drops to the ground, unconscious. Katsuki rushes to Deku, who's now fallen down on his knees, hunched over, trembling with his hands over his mouth as he stares unblinkingly at the unconscious form before him. Fresh tears intermingle with the blood pouring from his eyes. Sheet! Deku? You better not be hurt. Why are you bleeding? Katsuki reaches for his shoulder, but he just flinches away, curling in on himself even more. Katsuki jerks his palm away. He doesn't know what to do. Of course he doesn't. He just feels so useless it makes him sick. Katsuki can't do anything about this, and he really thought he could be a hero? He's just about to go get help when Deku's hand shoots out to grab his sleeve. Please don't leave, Deku's tiny, broken voice pleads. Katsuki freezes. He's not sure what else to do, so he just settles down next to the small boy on the ground, letting him hang onto his sleeve as his frail frame continues to shake with silent sobs. Katsuki's not sure where Deku learned that, to break quietly, like he's trying not to let his pain bother anyone else. He hopes it's not because of him, but by now, he wouldn't be surprised if it is. I got a lot of making up for Sheet to do, I'm not going anywhere, dumps. Deku gives a shaky giggle, and looks up a little, his teary, bloody eyes meeting Katsuki's for a moment. He sees it then, a glimpse of the power that drove the villain back. It's strange though. He sees no hostility, no danger. Just an overwhelming, ethereal light behind those dull, exhausted green eyes. Sure, it feels powerful and old, somehow, but it doesn't feel dangerous. Just warm, welcoming, and just so tired. Katsuki can't really describe it. What the hell happened to you, Deku? He doesn't know how long he stares, just sitting there with Deku as he tries and fails to collect himself. At some point an ambulance shows up and the police take the villain away. Through it all, Deku stays curled up, quietly sobbing with his head down and his arms wrapped around his legs, never letting go of Katsuki's sleeve. A rough hand on his shoulder breaks the spell, however. Katsuki looks up to see the heroes crowding around them, and he's almost relieved that they had finally decided to do their FING jobs and come to check on them, until he sees the HNDCFFS in Death Arm's hands. Are they for real? Katsuki bats the hero's hand off his shoulder a little more aggressively than he probably should. Not that he cares, eyes still focused on the quirk suppressant cuffs he's holding. The hell are those for, huh? Easy kid, it's just a precaution. Bullshit. He saved my butt. Maybe if you had done your effing jobs he wouldn't have had to do whatever the F he just did. Katsuki growls. Deep down, he knows what Deku did, but he doesn't need to think about that right now. Death Arm's face scrunches up in anger for a moment, but Emi Lady slaps him on the arm before he can say anything. They look at each other for a moment, before Empty Lady speaks. All we're trying to do is get him to a hospital, and hopefully back to his parents, safely. We're just trying to help. She reaches her hand out to help him up. Katsuki stills for a moment. What would happen if they found out Deku doesn't have any parents? What would they do with him then? If they found out what he did, what he can do, there's no way they'd just put him in the system. Katsuki's always been suspicious about how the police have been handling Deku's case. Besides one detective, none of the police were very willing to take Deku's case when he was kidnapped, at least, not after they found out he was quirkless. After Deku escaped the hospital, Katsuki had expected their attitudes to be the same. But they weren't. Suddenly there's a huge reward for any information on Deku. A pro hero is even personally investigating some underground hero Katsuki's never even heard of. He'd like to believe that it's just more quirkist bullshit, but he knows it's more than that. Katsuki doesn't know what happened at that hospital, no one was ever allowed to visit, but something's changed. And Katsuki just knows it has something to do with Deku's quirk. It's not just about the fact that he has a quirk now either, it's deeper than that. Katsuki's heard the stories, the conspiracy theories about people with rare or dangerous quirks that just disappear. Every record wiped, every trace of them gone. Like they never even existed. All he knows is that he doesn't want to find out what they, whoever they are, would do to someone who can destroy quirks. Especially not when that person is his childhood best friend. Before he can think better of his decision, Katsuki slaps the hero's hand away, grabs Deku's wrist, and runs. The heroes chase after them, their footsteps echoing through the alley they just entered. They race past a dumpster, Deku nearly tripping over a garbage bag before Katsuki practically yanks him back onto his feet, never stopping the whole way. The heroes, however, never slow down, gaining on them by the second as they burst out into the crowded street on the other side of the alley. He's too slow, especially with Deku stumbling behind him. How the hell are they going to lose these guys? Katsuki sees Deku slip a hand into his pocket and pull out another one of those bombs, this one wrapped in red paper. Where are they? Katsuki is confused for a second. There's no way he can't see the heroes running after them. Then Katsuki sees how hazy and bloodshot Deku's eyes look as he scans around sightlessly, blood still dripping down his pale face. Shit, he can't see. Right behind us. Deku nods, and then, squeezing the bomb until the strange markings Katsuki hadn't seen before start to glow with a strange light, he tosses it haphazardly over his shoulder. It hits the ground just in front of Death Arms. He stops, confused for a moment before the fuse starts to spark and sputter, ignited as if by an invisible hand. What the dash? Chaos unfolds as the bomb bursts into a dense cloud of glittering red mist, swirling and curling dreamily in the air like a fantastical storm. People trip over themselves and scream, scrambling to get away from the unknown threat. Katsuki swears he hears Deku let out a weak, bell-like giggle as they barrel towards another alleyway, the heroes lost in the crimson cloud behind them. Izuku doesn't know what to think as he and Katsuki walk down the sidewalk, his wrists still firmly held in the other's grasp. His eyes have started to clear up now, the temporary blindness associated with overuse of his power fading with every step they take. The skull-splitting migraine, however, is not fading at all. Normally, the day's events wouldn't have this much of an impact on his energy levels, but now that he thinks about it, he can't remember the last time he slept or had a last gulp of air and takes the napkin. I think I accidentally passed on one for all. Naomasa blinks at him for a moment. But I thought it could only be passed on willingly? It's supposed to be. I don't know what happened. He rubs his hands down his face as he collapses into one of the cushioned chairs in front of the desk. Yagi, now's not a good dash. I'm not sure how it happened. I saved a boy from a villain this afternoon. Everything was fine. I was just about to leave when the boy asked me a question. I turned around to answer and he looked like he was scared, maybe? But I'm not sure by what. He draws in another shaky breath, then our eyes met. I know it must have just been his quirk, but it. Toshinori shudders as the memory flashes through his mind. He's not exactly sure what he saw, what he heard. When he looked into those eyes, he could swear he'd heard a song. It didn't have words, exactly, but it sounded beautiful and strangely melancholic, like the sun breaking through the clouds on a rainy day. The images it evoked in his mind were no less strange. Towers being built and then crumbling down to dust. Flowers blooming and then wilting, then blooming again just as fast. And over it all, this raw sense of pure power emanating from behind those eerie green orbs. A pure white light, old and powerful and terrifying. He can't make sense of it at all. Not that it matters, anyway. Not more than who it reminded him of. Brought up bad memories. I lost my grip on my powered form and the boy must have accidentally swallowed one of my hairs because I felt it then, one for all leaving me. One for all isn't gone, of course. Toshinori can still feel the embers of it deep within him, its raging fire far from dead. But that's all it is. Embers. It feels hollow somehow, like the core of it is no longer with him. Nana had told him that he would know when it had been passed on, that he would feel it the moment it happened, and now he thinks he understands what she meant. But he hadn't meant to pass it on. One for all is supposed to be passed on willingly, but it had been passed on, without Toshinori's consent, without his approval. Is this one for all's own will? Is it even possible for a quirk to have a will of its own? Or did the boy somehow steal it? I may have lost my composure and scared the boy. I feel awful about it, but Toshinori heaves a strained sigh, unable to contain his worry any longer, despite the other worries that plague his mind. I'm more worried about what one for all could do to the poor boy. He just looked so frail. If he activates one for all. Toshinori's eyes meet Naomasa's, full of pleading worry and guilt. I'm afraid it may kill him. Naomasa's eyes widen as he pulls his keyboard closer. Do you have a description? Any idea of what his quirk could be? I'm not sure about the quirk, but he was around 13, maybe? He was short with white, curly hair. Long, pointed ears. Big green eyes, freckles, a bit on the pale side. Now that Toshinori thinks about it, a little homely. Naomasa starts to type something before he pauses, seemingly lost in thought. Wait a minute. Is this him? Toshinori's heart nearly jumps out of his chest at the sudden gruff voice from behind him, and he has to hurriedly press the napkin to his mouth to catch the blood that sprays out. His head snaps around to find a scraggly-looking man in a black jumpsuit and a strange, bandage-like gray scarf. Curtains of unkempt, greasy black hair fall around the man's face as he fixes Toshinori with a piercing look. He's holding a file in his hands, open to a photograph of a young boy with green curly hair and wide, viridian eyes. A very familiar boy. That's him. Toshinori shouts through his coughs. When did you? I've been here the whole time. The man drawls, taking the folder back and folding it under his arm. Where did you see him? It is not a question, but a demand. Tashinori hesitates, but the barely concealed threat in the man's eyes makes it hard to keep his courage. And near the shopping district, under that bridge just outside the border to outer city. He hopes that's a passable response. Tashinori has no sense of direction even on a good day. That couldn't have been very long before your nephew sent that text then, right? Naomasa says, causing Tashinori to whip his head back around to the detective. What is he talking about? Do they know this kid? The man sighs. He was long gone by the time I got there, but that was still more than enough time for the problem child to end up on the news, apparently. Tashinori just gawks at the two men. What is going on? Do you two know this boy? Is he in some sort of trouble? I could ask you the same question. The man in black says, his eyes narrowed in suspicion at Tashinori. What is one for all? More blood spills from Tashinori's mouth as he blanches at the man. Had he just spilled his most closely guarded secret? To a stranger? He looks to Naomasa pleadingly, hoping for a rescue, but instead finds a stark face of resignation. I believe you'd better sit down for this one, Yagi. For the next hour, Naomasa explains the boys, Midoriya Izuku's, situation. The story of a quirkless boy who developed a devastating power and lost everything because of it. A boy who was rescued only to be attacked and scared away again, disappearing for nearly 2 years. A boy who, despite being completely alone and likely targeted, had become something of a hero to the desolate reaches of outer Mizutofu, who apparently was selfless enough to rush at a villain 10 times his size to rescue someone, even as the pros stood by twiddling their thumbs. Someone who truly seemed to possess the heart of a hero. A child that surely didn't deserve the hand that life had dealt him. Maybe even someone worthy? Through it all, Tashinori's heart sinks further and further, the crushing claws of guilt and worry for this poor boy dragging it down inch by inch. Reluctantly, Tashinori has to explain one for all to the man, though not without a fair amount of skirting around the truth about its origins and history, as well as his own identity as the symbol of peace. No need for the man to know more than he needs to, after all. Eraserhead, he learns, is an underground hero who has been searching for young Midoriya for as long as he's been missing. He's a bit rough around the edges, but despite his clear dislike of Tashinori, he seems decent enough. Just enough. You mean to tell me that you have a transferable quirk? I guess you could call it. The dash. What did you mean when you said the kid could die? The room elapses into an oppressive silence, Eraserhead still boring into him with eyes almost as unsettling as young Midoriya's. Well, the one who gave it to me, she expressed, concerns that the quirk could grow too powerful to be contained by future generations. Tashinori sighs, meeting the man's glare with his own tired gaze. Simply put, there is a high chance that it could severely harm young Midoriya to use it, especially with how frail he is. The scruffy man sighs and rubs a hand over his face, before he abruptly gets to his feet, pushing off the wall and taking his scarf in his arms. He pulls his goggles on as he heads for the door without a word. Where are you going? The man turns around, hand on the doorknob, looking Tashinori in the eyes with a deathly serious expression. I already watched that kid die once. I'm not about to do it again. It's us as heroes, Izu. Thin beams of sunlight filter through the blinds of Izuku's childhood bedroom, particles of dust floating through like streamers in the wind. All Might's face smiles at him from almost every corner of the room, from the posters on the wall, the figurines lined up next to numerous notebooks on the shelves, even from his bedspread. The place fills Izuku with a warm sense of familiarity, and yet the place seems faded, like a photograph left too long in the elements. Izuku and Kaken sit on the floor surrounded by craft paper and crayons. The spiky blonde holds up a drawing featuring 2 figures, one overwhelmingly green and the other colored with yellows and greens and blacks. Kaken's face is split into a proud, toothy grin, set with the same determined, passionate expression Izuku always admired so much. Izuku smiles and almost says something in reply, when the scene before him starts to twist and distort, and suddenly he's in a different place, this time a forest at midday. A tiny, sopping wet hand pushes him right in the center of his chest, and he topples to the ground hard on his tailbone. I didn't need your help, you shitty Deku. Izuku looks up into the face of his childhood friend, seeing none of the person he once knew. Kaken's blood-red orbs glare down at him with a cold fury, his mouth twisting into the menacing scowl that would become too familiar in the following years. Tiny explosions fire from his palms, intermingling with dazzling showers of sparks falling to the ground. Izuku remembers this now. Once, Kaken fell into the river when he and his friends went exploring the forest outside Mizudafu. Izuku had tagged along despite being told not to, and had jumped in to rescue him when he fell. Kaken hadn't appreciated it. Not at all. Now, looking into that hate-filled face that he could never bring himself to hate in return, Izuku has to wonder where it all went wrong. Was it his grades again? Even the adults seemed to hate that, said that quirkless people couldn't be that smart, that he was cheating. Was it his analysis? Everyone always said it was creepy, he should have stopped. Was it the diagnosis itself? Did Kaken really hate him, just because he didn't have a quirk? It just doesn't feel right. Or was it something even before that, something within him that made everyone hate him, turn their backs and run away? He can feel it then, something churning angrily within him, crying desperately to be unleashed. He's suddenly somewhere else again, this time his old classroom at Aldra. Kaken is there again too, older now, but with the same permanent scowl and hateful look in his eyes. He pushes Izuku against the balcony railing, an explosion going off where his palm touches his shoulder. Izuku lets out a sharp cry as the heat sears through his uniform, burning into his skin as smoke curls from the ragged remains. If you want to be a hero so bad, Kaken's mouth twists into a sinister grin, then why don't you take a swan dive off the roof and pray for a quirk in your next life? Izuku feels his entire world shatter right then and there. It really hit him then. It should have happened sooner, he knows, but he could never bring himself to believe it. That Kaken really hated him so much that he would tell him to die. That he had really lost the only friend he'd ever had. When did it all go wrong? He can feel it again, stronger this time. He can hear its mournful singing, beautiful and tragic despite the sheer panic rising in his chest. It shifts, testing the motion as if it isn't sure it would be allowed to, and suddenly Izuku sees it. A bright, fiery cloud of light sits in Kaken's chest, bright and dazzling in its intensity. Izuku can't help but stare, entranced by its warm, flickering glow. It almost seems to shrink back as the stormy, black and red-clawed hand reaches for it, but it can't move, not the way Izuku's can. It's only when the claws dig in and Kaken starts screaming that Izuku realizes the hand is coming out of him, snaking from his chest like a grotesque, maddened serpent. Kaken is on the floor now, writhing and staring at him wide-eyed in fear as he screams, cries, begs. Izuku's eyes snap open and he shoots up into a sitting position, chest heaving with sharp, ragged breaths as he takes in his surroundings. Above him, an enormous cherry blossom tree spreads itself across the horizon, its dark trunk thicker than a skyscraper and its branches reaching too far into the sky to fully see. Dazzling, glowing white flowers adorn its branches, some drifting down to the ground around him. The Yoshino. So he must have made it to the garden, then. The ground next to Izuku splits, and a dark brown tendril of wood shoots out of it, curling in on itself before hesitantly reaching its tapered end towards his face. Izuku sighs as the root wipes a tear he hadn't noticed rolling down his cheek. Its soft, worried whispers fill his ears, a cacophony of strange sounds and voices that almost sound like a lullaby in his mind. I'm fine, Yoshi. Just a bad dream. Izuku reassures, running a finger along the glowing teal-green wood patterns of the ancient tree's root. He peers up into the perpetually twilight sky. Its unchanging stars give him no sense of direction or time, forever swirling and tumbling in their bright nebulae like millions of colorful fireflies. Bringing a hand to his face, he yawns, "How long was I out this time?" "About a day, at least," comes a gruff, somewhat familiar feminine voice. A shiver runs through Izuku's spine, his entire body turning as his head snaps to the voice issuing from directly behind him, not having expected a verbal response at all. He can feel the blood drain from his face as he takes in the large, white-furred spirit laying on the ground behind him, and his breath catches in his throat. What the hell? At first he thinks it's a dragon, but that would be impossible. Dragons have been extinct for ages. Well, he has seen one before, but it didn't really count. Now that he looks at it though, while it is shaped a bit like a dragon, its middle is much shorter than a dragon's would be, a bit more lupin in shape while still maintaining a certain lithe, serpentine grace. Its long, reptilian tail also resembles that of a dragon, ending a large tuft of flowing white fur. A thick red rope tied just before the tuft holds 2 forest green orbs dangling from it, the rope looping through them and ending in puffy crimson tassels. 7 more orbs are around its long, graceful neck, nestled into the fluffy, shaggy white mane wreathing its neck and head. Long, droopy goat-like ears protrude from the sides of its head, the ends ringed with little green spikes. Startling viridian eyes rimmed with gold stare at him down a fox-like snout, but they could never detract from the large, single horn protruding from its forehead, curving forward before sweeping back in a jagged shape. He feels like he can't breathe. A one-horned spirit. Even in the past 2 years, he's never seen one. A raw power emanates from the spirit's horn, Izuku feeling it like a frost crawling up his body. Even just looking at it, he knows this spirit could destroy him in a heartbeat. It wouldn't even have to try. Izuku stares, gaze wide and unmoving even as he feels a weight he hadn't noticed on his lap, uncurling itself with a soft yawn. Deku. Izuku looks down to the small creature in his lap. Kiko looks up at him blearily, still winking sleep from her eyes. Are you okay? You slept for a long time? I am okay, Kiko. Izuku answers, pulling at his fingers, eyes still locked on the one-horned spirit. I just overdid myself a little back there. A small gasp catches his attention, and he risks a glance down again to see the spirit's wide red eyes fixed on him in awe. What, Ash? You gave me a human name. Izuku tenses, I'm sorry. I just needed something to call you. And couldn't exactly say your real Nadash. I have a human name. Izuku tenses even further as she looks up at him. He usually knows better than to actually call spirits by the little names he assigns them, but he is a little distracted at the moment. Kiko's face breaks into a wide grin, eyes crinkling with excitement. I love it. If he likes it? The spirit starts hopping around, quills sparking in excitement. A rapid chorus of thank yous echo in Izuku's head. You happy about it? Of course. Almost no one has a human name anymore, not since the barrier. Only the oldest spirits have one. Kiko shouts, wriggling her weasel-like body happily. And now I do too. She's right now that he thinks about it. He hasn't met very many spirits old enough to have been named by a human, if any at all. In fact, a majority of spirits around nowadays are less than 1,000 years old, much less old enough to have lived during the age of spirits. Still, he'd never thought spirits would be that happy about being named. Most consider themselves above humans. They do, however, love to be close to the material world, close to the concepts they embody, and having a human name would take them one step closer to that, he guesses. Kiko? The spirit preens at the name. How long have you been here? She tilts her head to the side. Since you got here. And, how long have I been here? She blinks and closes her eyes, seemingly deep in thought. I think it's been, hang on, I know this. She shakes her head frustratedly. A day. The one-horned spirit offers. Yes, a day. Izuku sputters. Why, you've been here for almost 24 hours. He gasps, pulling his legs up and under him to spring up into a standing position as realization overtakes him. I've been here for almost 24 hours? He's been asleep here for a whole day? That could be weeks in the material world. Izuku starts to pace, absent-mindedly pulling on his hair as he tries to think. How long has it been? There's no way to know, not until he gets back at least. He's tried before, of course. Time just moves, slower, in the spirit world. Or maybe time moves faster in his world. He doesn't know. No matter how many times he's tried to run the calculations, tried to figure out the conversion rates, he never got a real answer. The difference in time between the two dimensions almost seemed random. Anywhere from a couple of days to a couple of weeks could have passed in the material world by now. It's the main reason why he prefers not to spend too much time here, if he can help it. The last time he'd stayed too long. A sharp tug on his pant leg jolts Izuku out of his thoughts. A tree root snaked its way around his leg, calming whispers in his mind. Izuku sighs, some of the tension leaving his body. Yeah, you're right. It's not like that time. He pats the ends of the roots as they make their way up towards his arm. If the Yoshino hadn't taught him how to go back, who knows how much more time he would have lost back then. Not that I really had a life to go back to. Izuku sighs again, settling his gaze back on the little spirit in front of him. She looks up at him patiently, albeit a little concerned. He settles himself back on the ground, careful to keep the larger spirit within his sight as he tries to remember what they were talking about. Kiko, why did you stay with me? The little spirit tilts her head, her eyes crinkling a bit at the edges before she lowers her head in a bow. Izuku sputters, staring wide-eyed at the spirit. Is she bowing to me? A spirit? Thank you. If you hadn't helped, Katsuki would be. The spirit makes a choked noise and shakes her head. I am in your debt. Izuku can practically feel his jaw grinding with how hard he has it clenched. He can't let her do this. She already shared her true name, and now this? Does she not know what it means to be indebted to another spirit? Especially to something like him? He reaches for Kiko, settling his shaking hands softly on her head. Surprisingly, she doesn't flinch away, the rough edges of her horns brushing against his fingers. There's no need for that, Izuku whispers to her softly, trying to put as much meaning into it as he can. I would have helped anyway, even if you hadn't asked. You don't owe me anything. Kiko looks up at him wide-eyed, before giving him a fond smile. Yeah, I know. She sighs. You really aren't what they say you are you? Izuku doesn't know what to say to that, instead just looking away, feeling a heat rise on his cheeks. It's strange to hear a spirit say these things to him, but not unwelcome. It almost brings a few tears to his eyes. A huff of air in front of him makes him tense. The one-horned spirit gives him an unreadable look, before resting its head on its delicate, fox-like paws. He and Kiko can only stare. Do you know her, Deku? She's been waiting here a while. Izuku's lip curls into a faint frown as he eyes the large spirit laid out in front of him. No, I thought she was with you? Kiko shakes her head, before nuzzling his hand and giving him a mischievous smile. Who knows? Maybe even the mighty one-horned spirit needs your help. By the old ones, I hope not. Izuku sighs, closing his eyes and giving a dramatic sigh. I just woke up and I already feel like I got run over by a freight train. I want to go back to sleep. You just slept for a whole day, dude? Kiko retorts. She then twitches a bit, an irritated scowl suddenly overtaking her features. I have to go. Katsuki's into some trouble again. Did he get attacked again? No. Just really set off. Kiko huffs fondly. But he's always angry, so it's probably nothing. Should probably check just in case though. Oh, okay then, Izuku says, a little sad to see the friendly spirit go. I'll see you around, I guess? She flashes him a bright smile. Of course. I meant what I said. If you ever need anything, all you have to do is call. In a flash of light, the spirit is gone, leaving only a small afterimage. Izuku sighs, raising his gaze once again to the one-horned spirit before him. She doesn't feel as threatening anymore, her prolonged presence having a slight calming effect on his mind, like spending too long in a room with a spider. You get used to it, but you still can't stop thinking about it at the same time. Finally having a moment to relax, Izuku realizes that he really does feel bad. His body is sore and bone-tired, and he can already feel the gnawing pain of intense hunger. He eyes the tattered sleeves of his hoodie, pressing a hand against it, and has to swallow down a fresh wave of panic at the sight of his own blood as it comes away. He glances fearfully at the spirit, but she gives no reaction, simply staring boredly into space. She hasn't noticed, and judging by the lack of spirits harassing him, no one else has either. Trying not to alert the spirit with any sudden movements, Izuku slowly stands up, and starts walking as quietly as he can towards the outer ring of the clearing around the Yoshino. He needs to get these wounds bandaged and cleaned up before it causes trouble. He throws a furtive glance over his shoulder, just to make sure the spirit isn't following him, before stepping onto the jagged stone path leading further into the gardens. The Garden of Spirits is a tricky place, much like the rest of the spirit world. You could wander in them forever if you lose your way, despite the many marked paths. Its large gardens stretch out beyond him, colorful flowered trees and bushes seeming to sway in an imperceptible wind. Everything alive seems to glow in the endless twilight, even Izuku himself. Thin, red-leaved trees twist from the ground at intervals around him, green bushes and rocks lining the stone path he follows. Izuku eventually comes to a fork in the path, divided by a mossy stone pagoda statue lit with a teal flame. He glances at the wooden signs he had once tried to put up to better tell the direction, overgrown with glowing moss and leaves. Nothing from his world lasts long here, it seems. Izuku would worry about which path to take, but he smiles as a root pushes itself through the ground next to the pagoda and points off to the right. He pats it, thanks, Yoshi, and heads in the direction it indicated. He tries to ignore the sound of delicate footsteps coming from somewhere behind him. It's okay. No one can hurt you here, not with Yoshi around. You're okay. But the thing is, would they care about that when they have a chance to get some of his blood? He walks a little faster. After about 30 more minutes of twists and turns and pointedly ignoring the ominous footsteps from behind him, Izuku comes to a pond. The stones in the path become large, rounded rocks emerging from the water at inconsistent intervals. Across the pond, a red archway leads into a thick forest of red and orange trees. So close. Just a little further. He steps onto the first stone, wet and slippery under the worn-out soles of his ratty red high tops. Izuku looks around cautiously as he takes another step, settling slowly onto the second stone. Movement among the glowing water plants in the clear water below. Claws scrabbling on stone behind him. Izuku picks up the pace, feet slipping and sliding haphazardly in his haste to reach the other side of the pond. As he reaches the second-to-last stone, so close, his foot slips. The world seems to slow as he falls toward the water. A large fish spirit rushes up to the surface to meet him, its large, jagged, protruding teeth opening into a sinister smile as it closes the distance between them. Izuku can only stare wide-eyed as he falls. I should have been more careful. A large force yanks him up roughly by the hood just as the spirit's jaws close where his head had been moments before. Izuku's heart thunders in his chest as he's dragged towards the other side of the pond by his hood, held aloft in the air like a kitten held in his mother's maw. He tries futilely to move, to struggle, but the paralyzing fear moving through his veins makes it hard even to breathe. He's dropped unceremoniously to the ground the minute they reach the other side, and he hears the large spirit shaking her mane out behind him, splatters of water hitting him in the back and head. Izuku slowly turns his head, shaking both in fear and in shock from the situation he's found himself in. Eerie green eyes that seem to mirror his own stare back at him in annoyance. Maybe even a little concern? No, he must be imagining that. Her fox-like face is just too hard to read, that's all. Thank you. Ignoring him, she bends her head down to inspect the wounds on his arms, sniffing with her muzzle while still careful not to touch him anywhere. That's when he notices it. The one-horned spirit's left leg, the one in the front, is curled in on itself, held aloft in pain. It seems to be an old injury, the end of the leg shriveled and blackened, its club of a paw unable to bear weight any longer. Now that he thinks about it, the footsteps behind him did sound a bit unstable, as if she were limbering. It looks so painful. Feels so painful. The itch in his mind is back again, and before he can even think about it his hand is reaching out, aura instinctively gathering. Don't! Izuku flinches back as the spirit's jaw snaps shut just where his hand had been. Furious green eyes glare at him from above, her teeth bared in a threatening snarl. Izuku curls in on himself, bringing his shaking arms around his head protectively as he waits for the blow. I'm sorry. He waits, shaking hands planted in his hair, but the blow never comes. He looks up to find the spirit laying a non-threatening distance away from him, watching him with a cautious expression. Izuku doesn't know how long he sits there, working his jaw as he tries and fails to figure this spirit out. Why hasn't she attacked yet? Why hasn't she demanded something of him yet? Ever since he became whatever the hell he is, one fundamental truth has anyways made itself clear to him. The spirits hate him. He's been called every harsh thing under the sun. Monster. Freak. Abomination. He's been told that he shouldn't exist, that he's just a monster that can only hurt and destroy. And the worst part? They're probably right. The only reason spirits are ever even remotely cordial with him is when they want something. As a creature that exists between worlds, Izuku has the ability to essentially act as a bridge for them. They often ask for his help with their humans, from small requests like helping children find lost toys to huge ones that have often ended with him treating gang members bleeding out in back alleys. He eventually got so entangled in their requests that he wound up being labeled as a vigilante by the police, much to his own dismay. However, what makes him the most useful to them are his healing abilities. Despite all their power, spirits can take decades to heal from injuries, but his power can heal them in seconds. And that's not even to mention how valuable his blood is to them. A slender hand reaching for him, blood-red nails like claws splayed wide and threatening. Izuku gasps and shakes the memory away. Banishing it doesn't stop the tremors running through his hands, however. A rush of air somewhere in front of him makes his head snap up. There it is again. That concerned expression. It has to be fake. He digs his fingers into the dirt, willing the shivers out of his body as he takes in one deep breath after another, an irrational anger rising in his chest. What is she getting at, pretending she cares? What does she want from me? Standing on shaky legs, Izuku slowly makes his way towards the red archway. He's already lost enough time here. He can't afford to lose any more. Where are you going? Izuku tenses, stopping in his tracks. He slowly looks over his shoulder. Be back. The spirit flicks her snout towards the forest, quirking a lupin eyebrow. In there? Alone. Yes. She sighs, giving him a deadpan look. Really? After you almost got your face chewed off back there? Izuku makes a surprised squeak. I'll be fine. I do it all the time. But the spirit is already rising on 3 legs, hobbling towards him as if to follow. He can't hold the question back anymore. What do you want? The words come out with a bit more vitriol than he intended, though there's still a telltale tremor in his voice that gives away his fear. The spirit stops moving toward him. Instead, she sits down with a huff, annoyance seeming to waft off of her in waves. Believe me, I don't want anything to do with you. Then why are you following me? Now it's her turn to be confused, apparently. The spirit tilts her head to the side, seemingly surprised by the question. She then huffs and shakes her head in amusement, making the fur of her mane sway breezily. No reason. Izuku turns fully around, balking incredulously. Why you can't seriously expect me to believe that? The spirit just smirks in reply, though not without attempting to hide the expression in her mane. A gesture that reminds him way too much of a certain underground hero and his scarf. Izuku groans as the spirit rises again and makes her slow, shambling way to the archway, turning around to wait for him by the large painted beam on the right. She flicks her head again, urging him forward. Guess there's no getting out of this one. Hesitantly, he follows the spirit, and she falls in beside him as he passes under the archway and into the forest. If she wants to play games and hide her intentions, then there's really nothing he can do about it. Besides, with her injury, Izuku can easily lose her later once he gets to the city. Why are you letting them do that? Faint streams of twilight filter through the trees as Izuku and the one-horned spirit make their way through the forest. They've been walking for a while now, long enough for the leaves on the trees above to start falling towards them, catching fire in baby blues and bright oranges. The little firelights drift around them, clinging to Izuku's glow as if it were a lifeline, brightening in intensity the closer they get. The warmth they give off is so comforting, why would he want to shake them off? He has to stifle a giggle when one flies up the spirit's nose, causing her to sneeze violently and whip her head back and forth in an attempt to shake it loose. Hands still over his mouth to hide his grin, Izuku snorts. Why not? They're harmless. Annoying is what they are. Comes her gruff reply. She shakes her mane like a wet dog, sending tons of little wisps into the air. But they feel nice. Like a warm blanket, Izuku cups one in his hand, letting its flickering light dance across his palm. And besides that, they make great wayfinders if you know how to ask. Izuku bends down into a crouched position, holding his hand out in front of him. The little wisp wavers in his palm, little blue and orange embers scattering in the air. Drawing in a deep breath, Izuku reaches deep within himself for the light of his aura, sinking into the feeling with thoughts of his world, of home. Strange whisper-like songs echo back to him, all evoking images of the human world, particularly of a certain lamppost in Outer City, and he offers that strange music to the wisp in his hand. It wavers again as it listens to Izuku's intent, and then drifts silently to the ground. The one-horned spirit leans over him to watch as more wisps gather around the first, an unreadable expression tracing her features. So, you can use the ancient tongue, but you can't speak like a spirit? Izuku sputters. It's not that easy to project thoughts, okay? I'm not a telepath. Especially when there's no one there to teach him. Yoshi had tried once, but for some reason the ancient tree only knows about as much as Izuku does about spirit speak. He can hear their thoughts in his mind, but he's never been able to figure out how they do it, how to speak the same way they do. It's frustrating, especially when he's essentially yelling at the air in public, probably looking like he escaped a mental institution. And the ancient tongue is any easier? I only know a handful of spirits who even understand it, much less speak it. I guess not, Izuku admits. But it's more like instinct? Like how spirits know their names, even though they can't fully understand them. The spirit only huffs in reply. Izuku mentally kicks himself. A spirit's name is always a sensitive topic, and usually he knows better than to bring up that particular detail about them. Ahead of them, the little wisps have gathered themselves in a line leading further up the path, casting strange blue and orange shadows that flicker organically against the tree line. As the firelights flicker and disappear as they pass under his feet, Izuku has the chance to think more deeply about his new stalker. No spirit he's ever met has acted like this. She's just following him, making conversation, not asking for anything? No spirit has ever been like this. Well, maybe except Kiko, but she actually has a reason to be nice to him, he guesses? He glances over at the spirit in question. Her emerald green eyes seem fixed somewhere ahead, seemingly avoiding his gaze. Just, what do you want? When the last wisp fades, the pair finally reach their destination. The little hollow is exactly as Izuku remembers it, the large tree yawning around it like a gaping mouth. Near the opening, another old sign hangs, covered in moss and mold. He'd wanted to mark this place, since spatially it linked back to a spot close to his apartment in the physical world. It's better than popping between worlds at random locations and hoping he doesn't end up in Mexico. The sign didn't last long though, of course. Nothing he leaves here ever does. As soon as he gets close, he can already feel the pull of his world. Traveling between worlds isn't actually as hard as it sounds, believe it or not. For Izuku, who exists between two planes of existence, his body is always drifting back and forth, only tethered by the will to stay put in one world over the other. So, for him, going home is as easy as simply letting go of his hold on this world. Unmooring from the docks, and allowing himself to drift like a boat out to sea. The street lamp blinks in and out as Izuku flickers into existence beneath it. It does that every time. Something to do with electromagnetic interference, probably. Or maybe it's just the magic. An eerie quiet hangs in the air of the desolate streets of Outer City, his now silent companion trailing behind him as he makes his way towards his apartment building through the decrepit maze of long-abandoned buildings. Even the occupied buildings seem to sag in their shells, longing for a past of glory that no longer exists. This place wasn't always a wreck. Outer City used to be so much more, before the quirk wars ravaged it beyond recognition. Instead of rebuilding, the majority of the population of Mizudafu moved further into the city's center, leaving this place to the fringes of society. The homeless and impoverished. The mutant and villain quirked. the gangs and drag dealers. And most importantly, the quirkless. In fact, Outer City is the reason Mizudafu has the second highest quirkless population in all of Japan, just below Tokyo. This place is just perfect for him, isn't it? A cracked television screen flickers on in a shop window, showing the news. The date in the corner tells him he's been gone about a week. Not so bad, he guesses. A flash of light and the screen blinks off again. Izuku sometimes feels bad for the owner of this shop. Poor man probably thinks it's haunted, with the way his lightning spirit likes to mess with the electronics. Then again, Izuku can't say he hasn't given the same impression to his own neighbors. More than a few of them legitimately seem to think he's a ghost. The sun is just finished setting when he reaches his apartment building, a decrepit high-rise that almost seems to sag to the side. It's just as he makes it to the third-floor landing that he hears the banging. There, at the end of the hallway to the right, is a stout man with a pipe, slamming his fist repeatedly into a door. Izuku's door. Mr. Tanaka? The man spins around harshly to face Izuku, nearly giving him second-hand whiplash. Mr. Tanaka is a short man with a rounded figure, accentuated by a loose button-down shirt and slacks. All of his hair seems to be concentrated in his bushy, deep purple eyebrows, currently raised in surprise. "The hell have you been, kid? Rent's nearly 3 days late," he shouts, throwing out a hand to smack Izuku's shoulder. The formerly silent spirit behind him bristles at the contact, issuing a low growl. Hold on." Izuku mutters, plunging his hand into his pocket for the keys to the apartment, grateful they're still there after the fiasco that has been the past 24 hours. A week now. After hassling with the loose doorknob until it's just the right angle for Izuku to jiggle the key into the lock, the door swings open. A forceful snap and pop sound through the air. Izuku moves his head to the side in a practiced movement, but Mr. Tanaka is not so prepared. What the foo? Izuku's aura catches the hammer in the air right before it slams into Mr. Tanaka's nose. The bush of his eyebrows rise to reveal a tiny pair of eyes, going almost cross-eyed as they lock onto the blunt weapon in front of them. The man scoffs, shaking off the initial shock with a long drag from his pipe. "DMN, kid. What have I told you about these DMN contraptions of yours? I already pay enough in maintenance for all the light bulbs you break. I don't need a lawsuit on top of that." Sorry," Izuku says, his cheeks heating up. "Just testing a new home security system. Still working out the kinks." "Those are some kinks, kid." Mr. Tanaka huffs, letting out a puff of purple smoke that morphs into little shapes in the air, the largest being a frowning face. Izuku's apartments, well, if we're being honest, it's a mess. One big mess. But it's not necessarily because he's a slob or anything. He just has a lot of projects going on. Bundles of multicolored bandages and open paint cans sit near the door. Schematics and blueprints detailing mechanical structure and sigils for various enchanting projects take up much of the counter space in the small kitchenette. Open notebooks and papers are strewn about the futon in the corner to the right of the door. Izuku stumbles over to the counters, searching through the clutter for the envelope he keeps the rent money in. His hand brushes against one of his projects, a metal structure in the shape of a wingless dragonfly covered in sigils, and it clatters to the floor. Mr. Tanaka nudges it with his foot, giving him an exasperated look. "What is all this, kid?" Izuku narrows his eyes and straightens up a little, hands still searching through the pile. Hey, we had a deal. I pay extra on rent and you don't. And I don't ask questions." Yeah. The purple smoke in the air changes again, this time wearing an amused expression. The one-horned spirit sniffs at it curiously, before turning her attention to his project on the floor. A nudge on his shoulder catches Izuku's attention. To his right, the vine plant on the windowsill has extended out to him, one of the vines holding a stained envelope in its grasp. If he looks closely, he can see the teal-green patterns glowing on the plant's stem and leaves. "You're a lifesaver, Yoshi," he whispers to it in thanks, before taking the envelope and handing it to Mr. Tanaka, who is staring at the potted plant in surprise. The man sighs, taking the envelope. "Anyone ever tell you you're weird, kid?" "Only all the time." Mr. Tanaka sighs again, pulling the money out and counting it. When the smoke signals in the air give a satisfied smile, the man turns and leaves, not giving Izuku a second glance. Without a second to spare, Izuku collapses on the futon and lets out the breath he'd been holding. The spirit tries to curl up near the other end of the room, but the space is so cramped that part of her body ends up through the wall. "It's a bit tight in here. You didn't have to follow me in, you know." Izuku tries his best to relax, but with the massive spirit staring at him and the currently mounting grumble of his stomach, he can't sit still for long. He gets up to scrounge the mini fridge for something to eat, but the white spirit's large tail end is currently laying through half his kitchen. Do you think you could?" She huffs and shifts over. She eventually settles down in the bathroom, her head poking through the connecting wall like some macabre taxidermy mount. The mostly empty mini fridge opens up to a dingy takeout plate in the back, which he voraciously grabs and tears through, shoving the savory sweet tonkatsu in his mouth without even heating it up. It's still not enough, though. Didn't he just go to the store? He cycles through his memory of the past day, or week, eventually landing on one in particular. Grocery bags hitting the ground, in an alley surrounded by other kids. "Oh no," Izuku gasps, clasping his hands in his hair. He forgot the groceries in that alley. He's totally broke right now, he can't afford this. How could he be so careless? Now he'll have to go out and look for food again, with all the people out and crowded around and Saklosa trapped. A gust of air makes Izuku tense, his shallow breaths catching in his throat, and he looks up to see the one-horned spirit's head bent over him, peering at him upside down. Her glittering green eyes seem to stare deep into his soul, so strikingly similar to his own that it gives him pause. "I have bigger problems right now." He glances over to the open bathroom, at the dark green hooded jacket folded up on the edge of the sink, the little protrusions on the hood poking out beneath the folds. They were originally supposed to look like All Might's hair, but he quickly found that his sewing skills at the time were lacking, and they turned out a bit shorter and stubbier than they were supposed to. That's okay though. They look a little like the horned spirits have, so they at least serve to make spirits a little less uncomfortable with him. If only a little. And remembering his last interaction with All Might, maybe he's a little more glad they didn't turn out right. A pair of green-tinted goggles sit on top of the folded pile. He smiles. They were a gift from someone who sympathized with the effect his eyes have on other people. Now that he thinks about it, he hasn't paid the hideout a visit in a while. Right, there's a place he can go that he can always count on to feed him for free, even if trying to fill his black hole of a stomach is usually a fool's errand. Besides, he glances over to the bed, with all its scattered notebooks and papers, he has some work to turn in. "Kid, this isn't what I asked for." Izuku pauses, the spaghetti noodles he was just slurping slapping back onto the plate. "Huh?" Griplock stares at him from across the table, his slitted red-orange tree frog eyes trained on him in a mildly disappointed way that contrasts with the light smirk on his face. "We only asked for info on one of their suppliers, kid. Not the whole DMN gang." Izuku swallows. I guess I got a little carried away," he says, offering a small smirk of his own. He winces as Vertigo loops the needle through his flesh again, stitching a particularly gnarly gash in his arm. The glass from that window had gotten him a bit worse than he'd thought, apparently. Vertigo's lime green hair is braided in its usual fashion over her shoulder, her goggles pushed up to her head so her poison green eyes could focus better on the task. The irises seem to spiral with a strange light, drawing him in and making the whole room sway and take on a greenish tinge. He looks away as everything tilts, closing his eyes tightly at the sickening lurch in his stomach. She responds by pushing a tawny hand against his face, pushing his head further away. "Don't look," she murmurs. "I need you to stay still." A low croak from across the table catches his attention again, and Griplock sighs. "Carried away?" He pats his frog-like orange and green hand on the file Izuku had brought to him. "Kid, how much time did this take? I know you want to help, but this sheet's dangerous, and I sure as hell don't want a 12-year-old's blood on my hands." "I'm 14. Izuku pouts indignantly. Didn't take that long to get that much information on the gang in question. A couple days at most. Sure, it had taken a few close calls and an infiltration into their hideout to get that much information, but he was never seen, and Griplock didn't need to know that. Besides, how could he live with himself if one of the outer vigilantes got hurt because his analysis wasn't good enough? Like that's any better, Griplock grumbles, flashing his red eyes again and startling Izuku. He's always found that part of Griplock's quirk fascinating. Griplock can use his eyes to startle people, much like the red-eyed tree frog his mutation quirk takes after. Most of his body is humanoid, save for his frog-like hands and feet, but his skin is a light green color coupled with royal blues along his sides and upper arms, and oranges on his fingers and toes. Two horn-like protrusions sprout from his head above his eyes, separating the bangs of his dark, shaggy hair. They blend in perfectly with his skin, more like bony knobs than horns. Izuku doesn't know much about them, other than the fact that Inkshot has lovingly nicknamed them his worry-warts. Listen, kid. If you used that big brain of yours to do anything besides find trouble, Yura wouldn't need so much practice with that first aid kit, says Griplock, nodding towards Verodigo, who is just finishing up the last stitch and pulling out a fresh roll of gauze. And don't say you can just do it yourself. We worry about you, you know? Izuku nods, avoiding his gaze as he fiddles with the last noodles of his spaghetti. The vigilantes have long grown used to his eyes, but habits are hard to break. I'm sorry. It's not like I go looking for trouble, he says, glancing over at the one-horned spirit, who had settled herself in the corner of the room at some point earlier in his visit. It just finds me. Griplock follows his gaze to the corner, but then sighs when he sees nothing. Another thing the others have had to get used to, but he still catches Griplock trying sometimes. Trying to see what he sees. Trying to make sense of it, even if that's impossible. I really hope they don't think I'm on drags. Believe me, we know, Griplock says jokingly. I don't think anyone could spend over a year around you without figuring that out. Beside him, Verodigo finishes bandaging his arm, tucking the rest back into the first aid kit and retreating back behind the bar to pick it up. She pats his head as she passes by, Izuku smiling at the gesture. The hideout is a cozy place for the most part. It's really an old rundown bar that's been repurposed into a living space, so a lot of the old architecture is still in place. It's a wide open space with a few tables and chairs, and a couch near the back corner with an old flat-screen TV affixed to the wall. The old bar takes up a majority of the back wall, however. The bar supplies and alcohol that would have been there have been replaced with a fridge and various kitchen appliances. The fridge used to be much smaller, but it had been replaced by a larger one Izuku had found at Dagoba Beach and fixed up a few months back. He couldn't feasibly get it into his apartment, and the group of 4 that live here probably need it more than he does, so he brought it here instead. Plus, they paid him a decent amount of money for it, so he's not complaining. Izuku watches as Verodigo pulls down a glass from one of the shelves and sets to cleaning it, wiping the already spotless cup with practiced motions. It brings back strange memories of Kuro doing the same behind a bar, of watching a game character hop around the screen of a handheld console, leaning over the shoulder of an older boy with Robin's egg-blue hair as his father watched with an amused expression. Izuku shakes it away, unease setting into his core. That never happened. His father was the kind of man who would never be caught dead in a bar, and he certainly had never taken Izuku to one. He must be imagining things. And yet, the unease remains, that strange lingering feeling that he's forgotten something important. That, and the usual ache that comes with thinking about his parents. I miss you, Dad. Ghost. Izuku looks back at Griplock, wincing slightly at the worried look on his face. How long had he been trying to get his attention? Just, please listen, kid, Griplock says, eyes softening a little. Promise me you'll at least try to stay safe out there? Izuku looks away, eyes finding the spirit staring him down from the corner. I can't promise that at all. But Izuku finds himself nodding anyway, just to appease the expectant expression on Griplock's face. Good now, Dash. The sound of a door slamming open interrupts Griplock and nearly jars Izuku out of his seat. Across the room, standing in the open doorway of the hideout, is a figure enveloped in shadow. The figure, backlit by the light of the broken street lamp outside, steps forward, causing Izuku to tense up, fingernails digging into the wood of the table. Then they suddenly cry out, flying towards Izuku. Izuku scrambles from his seat, falling to the ground with his arms raised protectively around his head. His aura is already twitching dangerously in his chest, preparing to defend when he's wrapped in something warm and slightly wet. Feeling his feet come off the ground, Izuku panics and struggles against the mysterious appendages binding him as he's pulled into a hug. Little ghosty. I know this voice. Slowly opening his eyes, Izuku allows his body to go limp as a familiar aura appears in his vision. Bright pops and splotches of color radiate from his mysterious attacker's chest, swirling with a myriad of psychedelic hues blending and meshing together. They change and rearrange even as he watches, seeming to almost dance in passion and vitality. There are bright pops of sunny yellow, soft baby pinks, and even deep, torrential blues. And most importantly, nothing even remotely threatening. It is, however, extremely bright, even by this particular person's standards. Was it always like this? The tentacles wrapped around him are a deep rosy pink today, just a shade darker than the baby pink skin on the arms clamped around his torso. Hey, Inkshot. The octopus-quirked vigilante peels herself off him, gold eyes alight with excitement as she clings to his shoulders. Ghosty, where've you been? I haven't even seen you out on patrol since last week. Izuku freezes in her grip. How does he explain this? In lieu of an explanation, Izuku simply offers her a guilty shrug. Oh, so we're not talking yet? Inkshot grins, releasing her hold on him. She tromps over to Griplock's side of the table, the tentacles that substitute for her hair trailing the ground. Griplock lets out an affronted croak as she shoulders her way onto his seat, scooching onto the end and leaning back with a sharp-toothed grin. There are other chairs at the table, of course, but Inkshot has never been one for personal space. Or maybe she just likes annoying Griplock. I'm not mad. Just glad you're back. Karai missed her favorite punching bag. Inkshot yawns, wrapping her tentacles around a snarling Griplock. I know I don't miss the position. Izuku gasps. She's not beating me up. We're training. Yeah, keep telling yourself that, kid. She laughs. Though, you might be giving her a run for her money soon if you get any better with that staff. Izuku is about to reply, when a sudden thought strikes him. He glances over at a doorway in the back wall, just a little to the left of the bar. The doorway leads to the living space the vigilantes share, and unfocusing his eyes, Izuku searches the space for a familiar red and gray aura. The colors of everything around him seem to fade, the auras of those in the room with him burning too brightly in his periphery. Again, their light seems so much brighter than usual. He's astonished by how easy it is to pick out the individual emotions on their surfaces, eyes darting around the room as he takes it all in. He can see Inkshot's bright polychrome swirling happily with intrigue. Griplock's normally anxious and fervent greens and golds tinging red at the edges in anger and annoyance. Vertigo's calm turquoise struggling to remain hidden in the background. Reading emotions is something he could always do with his oral sight, but it's never been like this. It's never been this easy. What's going on with my eyes? A soft green glow graces Izuku's cheeks before he closes his eyes, ceasing the burning sensations slowly building in them. The colorful lights cut off, leaving him in darkness. She went out, looking for you. A small voice issues from right. Huh? Izuku says, slowly opening his eyes. Vertigo is staring at him intently. Karai, you were looking for her, right? Why? Izuku admits, pulling a bit at his fingers as a little heat rises on the tips of his ears. Ha! Inkshot shouts, leaning her head on Griplock's shoulder, who has started to grapple with her in earnest. Eager to get back to it, huh? Just as Griplock seems to be winning his one-sided struggle with Inkshot's tentacles, she abruptly launches off the chair, pulling Griplock with her and causing him to faceplant into the floor. He lifts himself up on his elbows, a low grumble rattling in his throat. Ama! Shush, Kuji, don't be such a baby. Practically hopping towards Izuku, Inkshot's aura buzzes with a delighted fervor, one he's learned to look out for during his time here. The rosy colors permeating her tentacles and skin turn more red, golden eyes almost as sharp as her maniacal grin. How about we spar instead? We never get to when Korai's around. 'Cause you always wreck the training room, Griplock calls from the floor, glaring up at them. And we all know Ghost would kick your butt. Wanna bet? Diamen right I do. Easy money. Izuku raises his hands placatingly as Inkshot's lopsided grin turns on him. He opens his mouth to reply, but then notices a faint light coming from the front of the room. A spirit pokes its head through the dirty glass front door, looking around nervously before spotting the one-horned spirit, shivering, and then retreating back outside. Izuku simply blinks in confusion. What was that? I think it's time for me to get back to patrol, guys. Izuku says distantly, eyes still on the spot in the door the spirit's head disappeared into. You can't avoid me forever, Ghost. Inkshot whines as Izuku sweeps around her towards the door, avoiding the tentacles grasping for him. Maybe next time, Inkshot. Izuku says with a fond smile. All right, she chirps, and I thought I told you to call me Inky. Izuku slows momentarily, hand on the door. That's what Dad used to call Mom. I'd rather not. Izuku chokes out. He doesn't really mean to, but it comes out slightly bitter. He can see the blue motes in Inkshot's aura waver a bit in confusion, before she quickly lets it go, the smile snapping back to her face like elastic. That's all right, little buddy. Inkshot says, waving enthusiastically, just be sure to come back soon. You don't visit enough. Yeah, don't be a stranger, kid. Griplock calls, dusting himself off after getting to his feet. And be careful out there. Lots of kids going missing lately. Izuku nods, pushing the door open as the others say their goodbyes. Vertigo shyly waves and Griplock nods in his direction. There are almost a dozen spirits outside, some glowering at him impatiently and others fidgeting nervously under his gaze. All of them are keeping their distance, however, and they inch back even more when the one-horned spirit pops her head through the wall. Izuku sighs. This is going to be a long night. Kuji heaves a sigh as the door closes behind Ghost, as quietly as always. No matter how many bizarre things he's seen, that kid will always be one of his life's greatest mysteries. It certainly doesn't help that he knows next to nothing about the kid. They can't even figure out his quirk. Well, they know that it's terrifying. Kuji tells himself. If there's one thing he promised himself when that kid turned up on their side of town, it's that he wouldn't be scared of him. Now if only he could stop being scared for him. Something wet touches his shoulder, and Kuji looks up to find Ama staring at him, her tentacles slowly circling around his shoulders. Whatcha thinking about? She says, sitting down in the chair next to him. Kuji just scoffs, his cheeks heating a little at her unconcerned embrace. Ama is definitely annoying, but the warmth of her touch is welcome right now. She looks at him for a moment, before glancing at the door Ghost just left from with a fond smile. He'll be fine. Kid's tough as nails. Kuji digs his finger pads into his hair, sighing again. He'd better be. This kid is giving me gray hairs and I don't even know his name. Ama nods, eyes growing a little distant as her face settles into something uncharacteristically doubtful, her skin taking on a slightly indigo color. He will. Ghost is strong. But still, with all these disappearances lately, it's starting to look like quirk traffickers. Kuji grumbles, looking down at the table. His hands clench a little in his hair. She nods, fiddling with the fork Ghost had left behind on the table. As usual, Ghost had scraped the plate dry. Where that scrawny kid fits all that food, he has no idea. What if we got him to help? That way we could keep an eye on him. Karai doesn't want him anywhere near this, and honestly, I agree. Kid's been through enough with that sort. Not that the kid ever told them that, but it wasn't hard to figure out, especially with the night terrors they've witnessed in the few times Ghost actually fell asleep at the hideout. But why dash? You know why. Kuji snaps, before sighing to himself, pinching the bridge of his nose. He shouldn't snap at her like that. He knows she worries about Ghost just as much as he does. They all do. Then, when did they all get so attached to this kid? It's too risky. We can't expose him like that. If the wrong people find out what that kid can do, Kuji doesn't even want to know what would happen to him. And besides, their trust with him is already so fragile. Ama sighs, placing her head in her hands and leaning over the table. Her colors continue to darken until they're a dark blue, the tentacles around Kuji's shoulder in almost inky black. He puts a hand on her shoulder. He's never liked that color on her, never liked seeing his cheery and riotous childhood friend so darkened by worry. What about that hero that's been hanging around lately? We never warned him. Yura mutters from her place at the bar. Kuji and Ama both jump, having forgotten she was even there. He'd forgotten about that guy. Eraserhead, was it? This kid is going to be the death of me. There is definitely something wrong with Izuku's eyes. At first the difference is subtle, just a slightly brighter cadence to every light, a somewhat clearer view of what he could already see. Now though, the change is undeniable. Mro. Izuku's eyes zero in on the little calico cat's aura, its unignited light shimmering like a tiny star in its chest. Rough bark scratches at his hands and knees as he scrambles toward it on the thick tree branch. From here he can see the small creature's little light flicker with fear as it clings to the wood, legs wrapped around the branch as tightly as they can. Once he gets close enough, Izuku reaches out a hand. His aura runs towards it, the white and green coalescing into a single point that filters light through his palm. The cat tilts its head at his outstretched hand, before nuzzling into it, soaking in the warm, protective light. Izuku will always be fond of this side of his aura, full of light and comfort. It's almost funny how fast it can change into something terrifying. Izuku's certainly never laughing when it does. Within a few minutes, the cat is curled up in Izuku's lap, purring contentedly as his legs dangle from the branch. It jumps a little when the tree starts to lower them to the ground, the branch bending in a slope. Izuku isn't bothered. He recognizes the familiar wood patterns of the Yoshino's power, glowing its soft teal in little spirals along the tree's jagged bark. It had taken some getting used to at first, his strange, otherworldly patron popping up in random places as random plants. A guardian tree's spiritual roots grow throughout its entire territory, allowing it to manifest its will through any rooted plant within it. Basically, if it has roots and is in Japan, Yoshi can use it as a host, somehow using their roots to form a connection. Maybe that theory about plants being able to communicate through their roots holds some merit after all. Izuku's feet hit the ground almost soundlessly once the tree branch is low enough, cradling the cat in his arms. He turns to hand it off to the wrinkled old woman waiting at the base for the tree's trunk. "Thank you, dearie," she says cheerfully, smiling at him. "How do you always know where to find her?" Izuku glances at the koi fish spirit hovering next to her, its frills glowing white and orange. He counts about 7 horns. I have my ways. Izuku is about to offer to walk her home, when he notices the thin, golden cord running between the lady and the fish spirit. It thrums with power, giving it a slight orange glow. Is that their bond? The tether is gone as quickly as it came, disappearing into shimmering gold flecks in the air. Izuku just stands there, gaping at the space it once occupied. He's never seen one before. Not like this. Izuku could always tell who a spirit is bonded to. Bonds usually share certain traits with one another, they tend to look similar. In Kakin and Kiko's case, they share eye colors. But more than that, it seems to be a sixth sense he has, an extension of his oral sight that allows him to sense a bonded pair. But he's never seen the actual bond itself before. There is definitely something going on with his eyes. Pressure on his head jolts Izuku back to attention. Such a sweet boy. She coos, patting his head like he's a particularly well-behaved kitten. As she turns and starts to walk away down the street, Izuku perks up, scrambling to follow. Wait. At least let me walk you home. It's not Saf Dash. A wrinkled smile over her shoulder silences him. I'll be all right, dearie, she says, before partially sliding an honest-to-ancients Glock out of her coat pocket. I carry insurance. Izuku can only gape as she continues her meandering way down the street, followed closely by the fish spirit. Honestly though, he shouldn't be surprised. That's outer city for you. After watching the frankly terrifying old woman disappear around a corner, Izuku is back to rocketing over the city, the wind whipping through his snowy hair as he leaps from rooftop to rooftop. That koi fish spirit was the last of the group that was waiting outside the hideout. So, there should be no more spirits bothering him. Emphasis on should be. A flash of white light knocks him off his planned path of travel, causing him to roughly skid to a stop on the edge of an old abandoned office building. He catches his balance on the low wall of the roof, before shooting a glare over his shoulder at his overgrown fox lizard thing of a stalker. The one-horned spirit glares back, shaking out her mane with an annoyed huff. The tinkling sound the orbs in her mane make remind Izuku of wind chimes, having a melodic quality pleasant to the ear. "Must you keep running off?" She grumbles gruffly, "You're making this a lot harder than it needs to be. How do you keep finding me?" Izuku replies, hanging his head over the side of the roof, trying to catch his breath. It's a long way down from here, the ground below tapering off into a creeping darkness, swallowing the alleyway. Spirits mostly find him on his patrols by going locations he's known to frequent, like the hideout. Thanks to his high energy levels, they can sense when he's nearby, but they can't just know where he is. She shouldn't be able to just freaking warp to him. He can hear her make a noise almost like a chortle behind him. "What is it you said? I have my ways?" Izuku whips his head around angrily, and in the movement his eyes catch on something gold and glimmering hanging in the air, looping around towards him. The white spirit looks down at it too, the thin lines spiraling out of her chest, before meeting his eyes again, confused. "What ash?" Ice shudders down Izuku's spine as a piercing shriek rips through the air. His head whips around wildly in every direction, eyes scanning for threats as he takes in his surroundings. The world seems to light up around him, a blaze of thousands upon thousands, the ghostly lights blaring into his vision all at once. It hurts. He slams his eyes shut, hissing and pulling his goggles off to try and rub the burning sensation out. The spirit bristles next to him as she moves closer. He hears a strange crackle, like electricity. When he opens his eyes, she's almost on top of him, leaning over and around him almost protectively. Green sparks fly off her large form, and the largest orb on her chest is engulfed in a blinding green flame. Another one of the orbs is lit up too, this one giving off a smoky purple tinge. Her mouth is twisted into a vicious snarl as her eyes fly around wildly, looking for whatever made the noise. Something twists in Izuku's heart when he sees the wild fear in her eyes. Instinct moves him to comfort her, despite his confusion at her sudden change in demeanor. "Hey, calm down. It's Phi Dash." The scream comes again, shrill and piercing in agony, and before the spirit can even say anything Izuku is running towards the sound, ignoring her shouts echoing in his mind. "Wait!" It sounded like it came from somewhere to the north of them. So Izuku angles his path that way, his feet carrying him over the rooftops as his aura pumps through his arms and legs, a faint glow awakening around his body. The alley he drops into is eerily quiet, the kind of silence that almost feels like a worldly force, taking up both space and energy. Normally, Outer City is filled with the rustling of clothes, shadows flitting in alleyways and around corners. But everything here is so still, so unnaturally quiet, it fills Izuku's chest with dread. This place just feels so wrong. He starts to search the alleys, scanning around. It's too dangerous for Izuku to use his oral sight right now, not with whatever's wrong with his eyes still affecting him. Still driving what feels like so many knives into his skull, a constant burning making his vision swim. Izuku pokes his head around the corner of yet another alleyway, and is met with a palpable wall of darkness. The uncanny force swirls like a thick mist, its tangible gloom sending shivers through Izuku's entire body. A ghostly light blinks in the gloom, hovering there at a distance. "Izuku," a warm, welcoming voice floats to him, echoing strangely in the darkness. A voice he can never forget as long as he lives. His feet are moving forward without his input, carrying him towards the light as a fuzzy, weightless feeling blooms in his chest and head. He doesn't know how long he's been walking. It could be minutes, hours, days, following the light as the darkness seems to stretch on and on endlessly, swallowing everything around him. He feels lightheaded, head filled with cotton that muffles all his thoughts, everything in him screaming how wrong this feels. The light takes the form of a silvery apparition, wavering in an imperceptible wind. A woman with her back turned to him. Izuku knows that frame, that half-up, half-down hairstyle. Mom! Izuku says, his voice breaking into a million pieces as a tear slides down his face. She turns around, and Izuku's breath catches in his throat. Something that definitely isn't Midoriya. Inko smiles back at him, sharp dagger-like teeth glinting. Dark, dead eyes take him in hungrily. That's not my mom. This is so wrong. But his hands are reaching for her against his will, his whole body straining against whatever invisible force has taken hold of him. His aura roils angrily, ready to burst through his skin but struggling against something else. A gnarled, clawed hand reaches for him. He feels more tears slip down his face. Izuku's head snaps forward as something yanks him back, just as huge dagger-sized teeth snap shut right in front of his face. Something wet and sticky dribbles down from his forehead. All at once the dark returns to normal, the potent gloom disappearing like it was never even there, and Izuku is dropped to the ground, shaking and trying to catch his breath. The one-horned spirit leans over him, growling at something he can't see from his position underneath her. In a jerky motion he pokes his head out from underneath her, and before she shifts her position to cover him from view again, he catches a glimpse of something that makes his skin crawl. Something dark and shifting looms over them like a living shadow. It has a face like an anglerfish, dark bulbous eyes and teeth so huge and pointed they can't fit into the creature's mouth. They look like rows and rows of knives jammed into a too small opening, all pointing slightly forward and out. The creature's head is connected to a long, snake-like body ending in a menacing club-like tail, jagged spikes sticking up from it at odd angles. Above its head, a single antenna hangs like a lantern just over its jaws, blinking a ghostly light surely meant to lure in its victims. Then Izuku remembers the liquid dripping down his face, and reaches for it, wincing as his fingers brush a gash on his forehead. When his fingers come back tipped with red, he almost wants to throw up. Throwing himself around his strange protector, he once again catches a glimpse of the creature, of the blood stain on one of the creature's teeth. The little gold flecks in the red substance glint back at him mockingly. Oh no. As if to prove how bad the situation is, the monster lashes its club tail and hisses, the end crashing into a metal trash can. The very solid, very physical trash can. Oh shit. I just turned a curse physical in the middle of outer city. Curses aren't too different from spirits, at least at first glance. They are, however, far less complex both physically and mentally. No conscience. No horns. Just mindless shadow monsters that feed purely on human negativity, latching onto objects, places, even people. Anything that they can use to feed. They can't be reasoned with, can't be controlled. Well, not unless you're a witch, which is something Izuku is not and never wants to be. They're just horrible, horrible creatures that have hunted Izuku for as long as he can remember. Even when he was still normal, he saw whispers of them, flitting in dark corners, watching. At least back then he could convince himself they weren't real, just a trick of the mind, like every weird thing that happened in his childhood. He can't do that now. The curse lifts its head and lets out a piercing cry, so forceful Izuku can feel the wind whipping from his hair. He can't move. Sharp tremors run through his body in paralyzing waves as he stares at the creature moving towards him, through the hospital window and towards the hero asleep in the chair next to the bed, and he can't move, can't breathe, can't. A sharp pain in his head rips Izuku back to reality. Next to him a rock tumbles to the ground. "Move it, idiot!" shouts a little girl with big round glasses Izuku didn't notice before. Of course. He'd heard someone scream. The curse shrieks and rounds on the girl at the other end of the alley, the dead-end alley, and suddenly Izuku is being yanked back by his hood and dragged away. "Wait to stop!" Izuku protests, struggling to get a grip on the one-horned spirit with his still shaking hands. "We can't just leave her." She just yanks him harder, dragging him further out of the alley just as a large bird spirit starts to dive-bomb the monster. It barely makes a scratch. "You are not fighting that thing. Why do you care? She's going to die if I don't do something." Izuku cries, scratching and clawing at her as more tears spring to his eyes, but all his struggling achieves is an annoyed look from his captor. That girl's going to die and it's all his fault. If the one-horned spirit could run, they would already be too far away for him to even hell. Izuku looks down, momentarily stopping his squirming as his eyes lock onto the spirit's injured leg. He sighs in a breath. He can't believe he's about to do this. I am so sorry about this. But Izuku can't say it doesn't bring him a little bit of satisfaction when he kicks his leg out as hard as he can towards the gnarled limb. The hit connects. The spirit yelps and drops him. She curses in his mind, but he's already running back towards the curse, digging his hand in his pocket for one of his bombs. The one he pulls out is covered in bright yellow bandages, and with a thought his aura is flooding into it, igniting the sigils in a flash of white-green light. He sends the bomb sailing towards the curse, and it hits the ground beneath it in an explosion of technicolor sparks with the screams and cracks of a fireworks show. The bird's spirit goes to dive at the monster again, but its head snaps back as it screams and recoils from the brightness of the explosion. The spirit is knocked off course, sending it careening hard into the wall of the alley. Izuku sees a trail of gold leak from the bird's fallen form, but he doesn't have time to check on it. The bomb he used is only really made for distractions, loud and bright but lacking the firepower to do any real damage. Plus, he'd made them with use against humans in mind, which means they aren't meant to burn or hurt. Just blind and scare. He pulls his shrunken bow's staff out of its holder on his tool belt, pumps aura through it, and it expands in his hands as he rushes the curse. Izuku pivots and bounds off the wall to his right, flying above the thing's head and bringing his staff down hard on its head. The staff expands again, growing longer and thicker and slamming the flailing monster into the ground. A spider web of cracks ripples through the cement. The curse rears up and Izuku's staff launches back and hits him squarely in the chest, knocking the breath out of him, and he cries out as he falls to the ground in a heap next to the bird spirit. He barely has time to breathe before it's bearing down on him again, hissing and chittering a horrible high-pitched wail. Its jaws snap at Izuku's heels as he grabs the spirit and leaps out of the way before it crashes into the wall. He ends up in the same corner the glasses girl has sequestered herself to. A thin crack runs through the left lens of her huge glasses, her dirty gold-streaked green hair stringy with sweat. She has a plethora of trash gathered in her arms, and she frantically throws anything remotely heavy in the curse's direction. "Eat sheet, you fucking creep!" She screams, nailing it in the eye with the edge of a soup can. It howls, and Izuku drops the spirit and scrambles for his staff on the ground. He brings it up to block just as the creature's giant jaws crash down on him, pinning him against the brick. It expands in his grip, pushing the knives of its teeth away as it lodges in the joints of its jaws, but he can already feel the wood buckling, groaning under the strain even as he pours power into the reinforcement sigils. He's trapped. Glasses continues to pelt the monster with trash, but it's unfazed, chomping rapidly at the wood with that chittering growl. He could phase through the wall. The curse wouldn't be able to follow while it's still physical. But then he'd be leaving the girl. Izuku feels his aura jolt, the edges turning red, and this time, Izuku lets it expand out of him, wreathing his body in an otherworldly dark glow. Red and black sparks start to appear around him, flitting and crackling in the air. That's new. The edges of his vision tinge red. He's careful not to let it get close to the girl as a piece branches off and away from him. But as its power warps into a familiar crude hand shape, it does something unexpected. Little pieces of Izuku's aura flake off, drifting in the wind like embers. The extended part of it then shoots back into his body, settling contently. Izuku blinks. What? The curse surges forward, pinning him further into the wall. The brick digs and scrapes at his back. The stitches in his arm feel like they're about to pop. The teeth get so close to his face one scratches his cheek, leaving yet another stain of his blood on the monster. He can't take much more of this. Time seems to slow to a crawl as Izuku struggles to breathe under the ceaseless weight of his aggressor, the girl he's protecting, continuing to pelt the creature with metal objects, screeching curses and insults the whole time. There's no way out. No escape. He almost feels like he's back in that cage all over again, the jagged teeth surrounding him so much like metal and cold pressing in on all sides. Did I ever really get away? Then the embers ignite. The little motes of aura burst into dark, red-tinged flames, liking happily at the curse's skin. They remind him a bit of the little firelights, hovering in the air like ghostly wisps. Everywhere it touches catches fire like dry wood. Screams fill the air as the creature starts to burn, flying frantically and hurling itself into the ground in a desperate bid to put itself out. But the flames don't stop, everything it touches disintegrating to ash. Completely destroyed. Izuku feels like he's going to be sick, watching in horror as he clutches his shaking hands to his chest. Did I do this? More of the creature burns away, revealing rudimentary bones, sinews of dark muscle. And even those are gone within moments. Something inky black splatters to the ground. Izuku can't breathe. All its pain, its terror and agony echo back to him, the itch in his mind becoming a terrible knife driven into his skull. He just wants it to stop. Wants it to end. And strangely it does. Embers fill the air as the fire slowly fades, disappearing into the dark as quickly as they came. A heavy fatigue falls over Izuku, and his legs wobble as he slowly slides against the concrete wall to the ground, heaving sharp, shallow breaths. The curse slumps to the ground, its withered, scorched form twitching and whining pitifully. The thing's core is exposed now, the swirling pitch-black substance inside leaking out sluggishly. Izuku's about to finish it off himself and the suffering he's caused, when a surge of white strikes into the middle of the wreckage. The one-horned spirit hefts the glassy dark sphere in her jaw. She bites down and it buckles, shattering into tiny pieces. Dark liquid oozes out and turns to mist, the whole thing disappearing into the night. All at once the curse stills. What's left of it starts to waft off into the air as well, dissolving into nothing in the blink of an eye. Then she turns her infuriated gaze on Izuku. He really effed up this time. What? She hisses, slinking towards him as menacingly as she can with her injury. Were you thinking? Izuku freezes, his throat closing up. Sorry? She brings her face so close he can see the veins bulging out of her forehead. Oh, you're sorry? I out a dash. What? The F dash. Was that? Both their heads whip towards the voice. Glasses stands there, breathing heavily with eyes blown wide, still staring at the spot the curse was before. Oh, he really effed up this time. The ghost. She gives him a scathing look, hardening her gaze and putting her hands on her hips. It would be intimidating if she weren't half his height. Seriously? Do I look that stupid to you? No. That thing nearly ate me. And you... What the F was that? She shouts, waving her arms frantically. How did it appear out of nowhere? Are there more of them? Izuku stares at her, nervously adjusting his mask. What is he supposed to say? That spirits are real, and they're the reason people have quirks? That there are shadow monsters that feed on human fear? That he's some freak of nature and she should probably run? It's complicated? Glasses huffs. Whatever. She says, turning to leave. See ya around, dipshit. The girl walks down the alley, hands in the pockets of a grubby, oversized sweater. She's so young. Barely 11, if Izuku had to guess. What's she doing out here all alone? Wait! Izuku cries, shooting up and ignoring the dizziness he feels as he runs after her. She nearly hisses at him when he places a hand on her shoulder, and he recoils, hands in the air placatingly. He kneels down, balancing on his toes so he's level with her dark eyes. Are you lost? It can get pretty dangerous around here, if you couldn't tell. Glasses gives him the second most deadpan look he's ever seen, before sighing. Listen, dude. I've lived here for the past 2 months. Besides these ghosts, she makes air quotes, and shit, I can handle myself. She starts to walk away again. Can I at least get your name? Izuku calls after her. Her footsteps echo down the alley, and she turns back, a contemplative look on her face. You can call me Sasaki. With that she's gone, disappearing around the corner of the alley out onto the streets. Izuku sighs in exasperation. He doesn't think he's ever heard a child curse that much before. Well, maybe besides Kaken. At least it was a welcome distraction from the seething one-horned spirit currently breathing down his neck. Settling down on the dirty ground of the alley, Izuku does his best to ignore her, instead letting his thoughts wander. He examines his hands, the twinge of guilt and fear from earlier returning full force. What happened back there? His aura had detached from him, and that detached part had become completely physical. He'd always figured it could do something like that, in theory. It already has the ability to change shape and interact with the physical world, so unlike any other auras he's observed. So it's not too far off to think that it could have physical manifestations. That is how quirks work, after all, even if his power definitely isn't one. What other things is it capable of? Can I take other forms? Does the shape it takes have to do with his emotional state? If so, could he learn to control it? Why did it have to look like that? So many questions, but so little answers. But if one thing is for sure, it's that Izuku's aura is changing again, and the thought terrifies him. A groan from behind interrupts Izuku's quiet mumbling. The bird spirit from before groggily sits up, a thin trail of its gold blood flowing down from a wound on its head. Before he even thinks about it, he's already leaning forward, letting the white light of his aura seep out of his hand and wash over the injury. Even this seems to take less time than usual, the wound sealing up in seconds. Just, what is going on with me? The smaller spirit perks up a little once the wound is closed, blinking its 3 eyes rapidly. This particular spirit seems to take the shape of a large raven, but with an extra eye in the center of its forehead and extra wing-like appendages where its tail should be. He sees about 5 horns on its back, but upon a second glance he sees a 6th, half-formed near its tail. That's odd. Is it losing energy somehow? He reaches for it, but the spirit snaps at his hand. I hope you don't expect a thank you. I didn't ask for this, I don't owe you anything. It says curtly, before launching into the air and disappearing around the corner, presumably after Sasaki. Izuku sighs heavily, slumping. He's exhausted, bleeding, and there's a very angry and very powerful spirit glaring a hole into the back of his head. This night's not going to get any better, is it? Reaching a hand into one of the inside pockets of his jacket, Izuku pulls out a small packet of Hawk's Band-Aids. He'd picked them up at a convenience store at some point, even though he's not a huge fan of that particular hero. If any bird works for the bourgeoisie, it's that one. The Band-Aids don't completely cover all of the scratches on Izuku's face, but they'll do. As soon as he's done making sure they cover as much as they can and he's not bleeding, Izuku puts on the most apologetic look he can and turns to the one-horned spirit. Look, Izuku starts, not questioning how the spirit suddenly twitches beside him. I know you're mad. If you want to bite me, claw me, whatever, I probable. Izuku doesn't get to finish that thought because, for what feels like the 3rd time in as many hours, he is suddenly being yanked to the side by his hood. He's pulled to the other side of the dumpster. His elbow hits hard on the lid when she practically throws him into the corner between the wall and the side of it, and he lets out a sharp gasp. Essex! A loud thump sounds near the end of the alley, and the half-formed words of protest die in Izuku's throat. Looking through the dumpster, his aural sight locks onto a silvery aura. Someone's there. The aura itself is almost hard to see, with the way it seems to fade away into the background, wanting to be undetectable. It exudes a strange sense of calm, peaceful like the glassy surface of a still ocean. But of course, the ocean's moods can change in a heartbeat, still waters becoming wrathful waves and raging tsunamis. Izuku watches with fixed interest as the aura trails up towards the person's eyes. An eye-based quirk? He leans over slightly, poking his head around the edge, and he has to clap a hand to his mouth to hold in the gasp he lets out. Suddenly, he's caught between wanting to run away and bursting into tears. There, at the end of the alley, a man in a black jumpsuit and a thin, bandage-like scarf inspects the cracks in the ground. His dark hair framing his face is exactly as Izuku remembers, hiding a pair of stern yet kind dark eyes. Eraserhead. Why is he here? This isn't his territory. It's no one's territory. Most heroes barely remember Outer City exists. Then he remembers something. Something Shinso said suddenly makes sense. I know someone who's really worried about you. It couldn't be. Are you looking for me? But it was years ago. There's no way he still remembers Izuku, right? But what if... Tears fill Izuku's eyes, and he chokes back a sob. Eraser's head snaps toward him, eyes blazing red, and he quickly ducks back behind the dumpster. Footsteps rapidly approach Izuku. He exhales in a deep breath, willing his body to slip between worlds just a little, and his back slips through the wall of the dumpster, a soft glow enveloping him. He lands in a pile of trash just as he sees Eraser's aura around the corner. It ripples slightly, tinged a muted yellow with excitement that quickly becomes dark and sad. It continues down the alley, the dark deepening with every step the man takes. Shaking sobs rack Izuku, struggling to stay quiet in the echo of the enclosed dumpster. He doesn't want to be found. But he doesn't want Eraser to go either. Mru. Izuku's head snaps to the source of the noise. A large black cat peers back at him through the darkness, liking its paw with a mischievous look in its eye. Its eyes are huge and so dark, their emptiness drawing him in. Then they light up bright red, and hundreds more open up across its body to blaze with them. The display illuminates two dark horns sprouting from its head. That's not a cat. Izuku jolts back in alarm when it lunges for him, stumbling through the dumpster and back into the open alleyway. Another pair of red eyes snaps to him. Izuku never wanted to leave. It was the hardest decision he ever made, running away from that hospital. But it doesn't matter what he wants, not when people are in danger. Not when he's the one putting them in harm's way. Tears leak down his face as he races over the rooftops. His mother had always called them the Midoriya tears, thought they were funny. They don't feel very funny right now. He can't stop the memories echoing to him, the capture scarf liking at his heels when he stumbles a little over the edge of a fire escape. It wasn't your fault, kid, a soft voice says to him, a hand rubbing soothing circles in his back. Just breathe. It'll be all right. He makes a sharp turn, dodging the gray material shooting from behind as he launches himself into the broken window of an abandoned apartment building. Quirks are just tools. Just like you said, even with mine, I still fight practically quirkless, he says, a small grin tugging the edge of his lips. And you're a hell of a lot smarter than me, problem child. So no, I don't see why you can't be a hero. Izuku scrambles through the hallway to the window on the other side, leaping through as soon as he reaches it. His foot catches on a piece of broken glass and he cries out. He slips. Large arms wrap around him, and he buries his face into the man's chest, clinging to the dark fabric as chokes down his sobs. It's all right. You're safe here. I won't let anyone hurt you, okay? Gray fabric wraps him up in its embrace, pulling him up through the air and back through the window. Standing there, surrounded by the coils of his own scarf, is Aizawa Shoyuda. He pulls his goggles down, revealing softly glowing red eyes. The edges seem almost wet. Kid! That voice. He never realized how much he's longed to hear it again. Eraser. Izuku's aura shudders, deeply agitated by the glaring red of the man's gaze. Those eyes used to calm it down, force it into SB Emerson. But it's so much stronger now. His eyes widen and panic rises in his chest as he realizes what it's about to do. He squirms in the scarf's grip, but the coils won't budge, only tightening their grip. Look out! Izuku desperately cries. But it's too late. The hero's head snaps back when his aura shoots out in a fist, and he crumbles to the ground.